This meeting of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission is called to order. We will not have pyrotechnics for the entry. But we will first call the roll. For those of you joining virtually, just remember to state whether there are others present with you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Chairwoman Scarlett.
Here.
Commissioner Allman.
Here. No one's present with me.
Commissioner Dieter.
Here.
Commissioner Matlock.
Here, no one's present with me.
Commissioner Perry.
Here, and I'm alone.
Commissioner Rader.
Here.
Commissioner Ragsdale. Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Stafford. Commissioner Wood.
Here.
Secretary Hargett.
Here.
Treasurer Lillard.
Here.
Comptroller Mumpower.
Here.
Commissioner Morrison.
Nathan James here.
Chairwoman, you have 11 voting members present and 12 members present.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Our first item is the adoption of the agenda for today's meeting. I would propose an amendment to the agenda. We're going to remove the new academic program for Austin Peay State University, which is the Athletic Training Master of Science, and this is upon Austin Peay's request. So with no questions or objections, I'll entertain a motion in a second to adopt the agenda as amended.
So moved. Second.
Madam Secretary?
Chairwoman Scarlett.
Aye.
Commissioner Allman.
Aye.
Commissioner Dieter.
Aye.
Commissioner Matlock.
Aye.
Commissioner Perry.
Aye.
Commissioner Rader.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Here. Aye.
Commissioner Wood.
Aye.
Secretary Hargett. Treasurer Lillard.
Aye.
Comptroller Mumpower. Chairwoman, you have 11 ayes.
Okay, thank you so much. The next item we have is the public comment. Dr. Gentile, do we have any requests?
Madam Chair, we have no public comment requests today.
Thank you very much. With no questions or objections, I'll entertain a motion in a second to adopt the minutes from February 20th, 26th.
So moved. Second.
Madam Secretary?
Chairwoman Scarlett.
Aye.
Commissioner Allman.
Aye.
Commissioner Dieter.
Aye.
Commissioner Matlock.
Aye.
Commissioner Perry.
Aye.
Commissioner Rader.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Wood.
Aye.
Secretary Hargett.
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard.
Aye.
Comptroller Mumpower.
Yes.
Chairwoman, you have 11 ayes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone, to our May commission meeting. As we look across the landscape across our state, I think there's clearly, look at all the agenda items we have today, there's not really a standard approach to post-secondary, and things are evolving. A lot of our conversation today is about innovation that we'll hear about, whether that is innovation with the funding formula or the work Pell initiatives or credentialing. Essentially, we've talked about this so many times about streamlining a path for students to be able to access and to be able to complete post-secondary credentials that are taking them into the jobs that we have today in Tennessee and beyond. But we really want to give Tennessee that competitive edge. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gentile to walk us through his report.
All right, can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Today I'm going to go over my usual THEC happenings. I'm then going to talk about the outcomes-based funding formula review process we're under right now, and then shed some light on Workforce Pell that came out of the Big Beautiful Bill Act last year and is being implemented by July 1 of this year. I want to thank Dr. Brian Noland of ETSU, President Lakari of Austin Peay for being here today. I know that Cam Khan of Takua will join us here shortly. Just as a point of note here, our next commission meeting is in July, and it'll be hosted by Austin Peay State University, and they're pulling out the red carpet for us, and it'll be exciting. So thank you, President Lakari, for all that planning. I typically talk about the new employees that we've had join THEC since our last convening. I'm going to do this in a way that highlights a portion of our work that gets highlighted somewhat often, but sometimes there's just such compelling evidence to speak to that I want to go about it that direction. Late last month, we had a press release that we shared with you that highlighted Tennessee as being #1 in the nation again for FAFSA completion for 10 years in a row. I looked at the numbers this morning. First of all, FAFSA completion is up across the country, in large part due to the new FAFSA and how simplified it is. But in Tennessee, we are at 70.9% of high school seniors having completed the FAFSA. Again, 10 years of being number one in the country. Importantly, the next 5 states after us, Illinois, Texas, New Jersey, California, New York, all have universal FAFSA completion policies, meaning you can't graduate high school without completing the FAFSA or getting a waiver not to do so. We don't have that requirement here in Tennessee. We do not require a high school senior to graduate if and only if they complete that FAFSA. We're the volunteer state. We don't want to put that on students if they don't want to do so. That said, we do require it for our own financial aid here in Tennessee. So it's very important that students complete the FAFSA to get access to the federal dollars and the state dollars. In that press release, we highlighted something that I was the one who made sure it made that press release. It was this. We've got 3 of our own programs here in our agency that is all directed to helping high school seniors get into college. Gear Up, Advise TN, and our financial aid outreach team. By way of defining what those are, Advise TN, putting high school advisors into underserved high schools that do not have college access professionals. Gear Up, working with students from middle school through high school in underserved counties, primarily rural counties, to help make sure those seniors can get on to college. And then our financial aid outreach team. This is a group of 8 professionals who visit every high school in Tennessee throughout the year to hold FAFSA workshops, one-on-one consultations, financial aid 101 nights. Every single high school, going to all the publics and most privates as well. In that press release, we highlighted something very important. We have kind of a natural experiment happening right now in that we have all new Gear Up high schools with a new Gear Up grant. We have all new Advise TN high schools as well. From a year-to-year comparison, from last year to this year, our Advise TN FAFSA completion rate for those same high schools before and after implementation increased 16 percentage points at those high schools. Not 16%, 16 percentage points. For our Gear Up high schools, it increased 20 percentage points. And it goes to show what it takes to be on the ground in these high schools. As I say all the time, we make higher education hard to understand, but it takes professionals to hold the hands of these students and make sure that they can navigate through this complicated process. So with that said, our 4 new staff are actually applying to all 3 of these programs. Aubrey Badon from Gear Up, Andrea Tinsley is joining Advise TN for Cannon County High School, Shannon Reyes is joining Advise TN for Forest School, and Jeffrey Upshaw will start next week as a financial aid outreach professional for Upper Cumberland. They're going to make sure that they transform the lives of Tennesseans across Tennessee. Welcome to the team. Also of note, this past month, we've had some substantial convenings that align directly with our strategic master plan, all in the same week from the Academic Affairs Bureau, which I don't know if that was wise or not, but they survived it, and we're here to tell the tale of it. We had the Credit Mobility and Transfer Convening hosted by MTSU and in partnership with TBR, with 167 professionals from public and private institutions coming together to better understand how we can help, everyone can help students navigate the maze that is our higher education system. Alignment was a key pillar of our strategic master plan, and the articulation between our sectors, making sure that students can seamlessly transfer from one to the other, is one of our biggest strategies. Veterans Initiatives Conference was held here in Tennessee Tower. This comes together with all of our VETS campuses and campuses that want to be VETS campuses. VETS campuses are a designee that we give out to institutions who serve veterans well and military-affiliated students well as well. Every year we bring them together to highlight best practices, what's working well, what's not working well, how can we do better. We had 116 professionals here from our institutions. In the background of all of this, we're working on the outcomes-based funding formula review. We started talking about this with you a year ago at our May commission meeting. Russell Van Zomeren gave an overview of what the next year is going to look like. I'm going to give you an overview of what the next 3 months are going to look like for here. We've been working with you. We've been working with our Formula Review Committee, which includes the presidents of our institution and includes the chairs of finance and education committees, the commissioner of F&A, the comptroller as well, to come together and highlight what's working, what's not working with the formula. Where can we push on it to make it even better? Right now, we're in that third box right there, where we're creating the new formula, taking in what we've heard is working, what's not, and coming up with ideas. We have another review committee meeting with our Formula Review Committee before the July Commission meeting to finalize some items. At the July Commission meeting, we intend to present to you proposed revisions to that formula. Overarching considerations with this formula review. First of all, how can we make sure this aligns with the new strategic master plan? That includes incentivizing efficiency and completion. Revisit workforce metrics to ensure their relevance, that they're effective, and then to foster greater alignment between our sectors. And as someone who's worked with the formula directly since I started here 13 years ago, I'm a big believer that we can all think about what to add to the formula, but when people start asking me or telling me what they think should add to the formula, I ask in return, what should we take out of the formula as well? How can we streamline and simplify it so that it is best understood by our institutions who ultimately need to work with this, so to not add to this complexity. And also through this process, to address and or surface concerns that weren't necessarily on our radar or on your radar, but might be on others' radars. I'll talk about one key area that we're still working through right now. So general consensus so far, number one here, move the graduation rate that's in the university sector from a 6-year to 4-year. That was a general consensus that came about roughly in February. As you'll hear from Lou and Colleen for our legislative update, this is actually going to be done for us. There's a bill that passed that requires any graduation rate metric in the formula to be a traditional on-time measure. So that actually forces us to move to that 4-year graduation. There's been talk about how to make the dual enrollment metric either better or more robust. Right now we count head count. There's been talk about making it FTE related or completion related of those courses. And then some simplification that's come forward is to eliminate awards and degrees per 100 FTE. We have a graduation rate. This one seems a little bit duplicitous. Is an opportunity to streamline. Those were relatively easier conversations. Other things that came to us from the members of the review committee. One, could we change the adult learner premium from age 25 to 23? Our completion outcomes and our progression metrics for undergraduate students, if they're an adult, they are worth more in the formula. They get a premium. An adult in our formula is age 25. Tennessee Reconnect starts at age 23. So there's conversation about, can we align those together to make the definitions the same? The reason why we as staff are recommending not moving forward with this is that 23, you start dipping into traditional college-age students who are completing degrees. And we think that needs some more study to see how that could possibly impact the distribution. There's always conversation about changing the premium levels themselves, focus population weights. We had some analysis done in partnership with SHIO that suggests right now it's not necessarily needing to change, at least not with further information. In the community college sector, we reward them for non-credit hours for workforce training. There was a request that we allow that to incorporate secondary students as well, because those students are not in the workforce or not going directly into the workforce, and also because it'd be hard for us to define that. Right now, we are suggesting to pause implementing that here. Still working through. And this is what gives me, I should say, the first two slides were the easier stuff. Still working through are the complicated stuff. I said in the beginning, actually I said back in 2022, we introduced a workforce investment premium. That was a big request from the governor's office, and that is rewarding institutions who complete degrees in high need fields. It's a premium just like with adult learner, low income, and academically underprepared. At the time, to have alignment and definitions with other portions of our agency, including the quality assurance funding, we aligned our definition to be STEM plus healthcare. Degrees in STEM plus healthcare will be worth more in the formula. Back then I said, but we'll need to revisit this because there could be better ways of measuring what high need, high demand are. We're in the process of doing that right now. We've convened staff from the institutions and from the representatives of the review committee to think through what that could look like. SCORE, a nonprofit organization advocacy group here in Tennessee, they have put out a proposal for this. They may have contacted you about this as well. That it's called their impact credentials. It's based on aligning this workforce investment premium with salary, demand in the field, stackability of credentials. There is some complexity with that measure. However, we are considering that as well as our supply and demand report and what counts as high demand. There'll be more there, and I want to talk with each of you outside this meeting to detect what you're thinking on this. Second, this is one that was brought to our attention, although we were not surprised by it. The impact of growth at UT Knoxville on all other institutions' appropriations. There have been some convenings between the CFOs at our institutions about this exact thing. One commission member highlighted his concern about this as well. Looking at the distribution this year, UT Knoxville earned about $15 million more in the formula. And you could see that money being pulled away in the similar magnitudes from the other institutions collectively. A question put out there is the formula broken? Are there ways that the formula is biased towards UT Knoxville here? My take on it is that for the first 15 years of the formula's existence, this has not been an issue. UT Knoxville has traditionally not been the number one or number two highest performer. And again, performance in the formula is in comparison to who you are as an institution last year compared to now. Yes, UT Knoxville has the highest graduation rates, but we reward based on the growth in your base graduation rate, no matter who you are. UT Knoxville has turned a corner. Their enrollment has grown substantially. Enrollment does lead to outcomes. Their graduation rate has gone up as well. This has been happening over the last 5 years. It's been starting to hit in the formula most recently. Institutions have brought forward some ideas on what could possibly be considered in with this. And I should mention institutions, but also the systems. UT's at the table, TBR's at the table in these conversations. One idea was to discount out-of-state students. That's been substantial growth at UT Knoxville and out-of-state students. Another is to put UT Knoxville into a separate formula or distribution. A third is to have a hold harmless, where we govern the max and the minimum of what institutions can earn. Every single one of those options have given me heartburn. And in fact, when we look at one of them that I was most drawn to, out-of-state students, because in the early iteration of the formula, we did discount out-of-state students. Doing that similar treatment now actually has similar impact as other institutions have been growing in out-of-state students too. What's important to note here, first of all, I don't have a solution to put in front of you today. Love to hear from you on your solutions, what you think we could look into. The growth in percentage at UT Knoxville is not unlike what we've seen at other institutions. In a no new money situation, their growth is about 3.5% in appropriations. We've seen as high as 9, 10%, 12%. Oftentimes at some of our smallest institutions like Dyersburg State or Motlow State. When those institutions increase by 10%, it's not drawing a lot of money from other institutions. When it increases by 3.5% at UT Knoxville, given their level of appropriation, it does draw from a lot of other institutions. So I'm going to pause there, see if there's any questions on that bullet point or perspective.
Any questions?
Well, I know you don't want to wade into a heavy discussion about this.
Well, we certainly can, please.
Well, I would want us to be careful, excuse me, to not wind up punishing an institution for doing what we expected them to do. No, I can go back in my own history, waiting for the day in which Knoxville would take, in a much more serious fashion, the outcome-based formula. And now that they have, it is what we expect of all of the institutions. I don't want to be in a position of saying to an institution that's doing what we expected of them that there's going to be some negative consequence of that. Now, do I have among the choices you've offered here a favorite? No, not really. And I recognize that the way that the system works, but I kind of hate to see it identified here as, well, what are we going to do about Knoxville doing well? I mean, that's just in my mind, that's just a wrong measure.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Okay. I'll be having more conversations with you over the coming months on this. A third that we're still working through, and I'll be honest, is not due to the complexity of what this could look like. The formula may not be the right spot for it. A colleague and mentor of mine long ago said, the formula is not necessarily the altar on which we absolve all of our sins. Thank you, Dr. Deaton, here for that. So it may not be the solution for everything, and sometimes adding complexity. Can we incentivize transfer and articulation between our institutions? We're still thinking through what that could look like, and it may not be a formal proposal here. We'll have other policies that we can get at making and streamlining transfer better. So we'll have more to come to, and I really would like to set up before the July Commission meeting, one-on-one meetings with you to think through these items. Workforce Pell, almost a year ago in July, I presented to you on the Big Beautiful Bill Act with what was in it. One of those was the Workforce Pell. Workforce Pell, as a reminder, it's a completely new financial aid program. It will be implemented starting July 1. It helps students afford this quick pathways into high demand careers. These are programs that are currently not eligible for Pell in general. Programs that are as little as 8 weeks to as much as 15 weeks. They must meet approval. These programs have to be approved at the state level for quality, completion, and job placement standards. I'll talk more about what that could look like, what that's going to look like here. I want to thank Dr. Julie Roberts behind me, who has been leading this effort on THEC's behalf. Essentially what this looks like here in Tennessee is that they, in the bill, gave the governor and the departments of labor the ability to take lead on this. Governor's office approved a working group that is co-led by Department of Labor and Workforce Development and THEC. The members on that working group include Tennessee Board of Regents, Department of Education, University of Tennessee System, TECUA, MoreTech, SCORE, and an outside consulting group, Education Strategy Group. You may recognize that name. They helped us with the strategic master plan. What's set in proposal right now is a draft policy that's being circulated to the Workforce Development Board, the board ultimately charged with approving this. Eligible programs will be vetted by Labor, Workforce and Development and THEC. And final authority for approval will sit with the State Workforce Development Board. And like I said, draft policy will be sent out for public comment in the coming weeks. Workforce Pell in the bill itself and the rules associated with it at the federal level require it to go to high skill, high wage. In Tennessee, that demand is going to follow what's in the Tennessee Perkins Plan. In demand programs, that's going to follow what's in the Tennessee Supply and Demand Report, a report that we lead in authorship with other department agencies. The programs must be stackable and portable, meaning that they lead to further credentials and that they have resonance in more than just one place. And they must be transferable to a certificate or degree program. Most importantly, programs that are coming from institutions that just set up shop for this particular issue will not be approved. They have to be in operation for at least 1 year. Accountability standards, these are federal accountability standards, a 70% completion rate, 70% job placement rate, and must create a value-added earnings. We're anticipating that the Pell Grant will be no more than $2,000 per student. Any questions on the Workforce Pell? Okay. A further update on master plan implementation. At the July commission meeting, we intend to bring forward refined goals by strategy and by pillar, and then set up, and Dr. Bob Smith, Commissioner Smith, sent some ideas on dashboards that could work for this, dashboards at the November commission meeting to share out with you on progress. I am eagerly anticipating and awaiting our Chief Strategy Officer, Amanda Clefane, to come back by the end of June to help me pick this back up and run with it. Finally, I would like to take a moment to recognize, this should be her last commission meeting, Commissioner Julia Dieter, student commissioner out of UT Knoxville, Baker School. Commissioner Dieter, if I can for 1 second here, just say, staff are not supposed to have favorites when it comes to student commissioners. But I think because of your Baker background and your policy-minded background, they eat up the questions that you ask and the points that you raise. And they talk about them after the commission meetings. They'll say, gosh, Julia had such great questions. And I'm so glad that she asked them. Your perspective on this board has done exactly what it's supposed to do, plus more. For the student commissioner to come from your background and say, here's my perspective on what this is, or here's what I'm seeing about this master plan. What might a migration plan look like? How's that going to impact students? That was one that you brought up in the fall that has stuck with me. Questions about surveying students when I talked about the lottery funding most recently. Your insights and your perspective. It was no surprise, I think, to anyone, no matter how selective it is, for you to win the Truman Scholarship. I know you're going into your senior year and will utilize that Truman Scholarship in the best way to further your public policy interests. But if we can, just take a moment here to thank her for her service to the commission. With that, we also have a certificate of appreciation signed by the governor. And when I mentioned earlier today, just now, that this should be her last commission member, she asked the commission meeting, she asked me, is this my last commission meeting? We said, yes, asterisk. If there's not a student commissioner in place by the July commission meeting, you will be a commission member still there. And maybe we'll see you, maybe you'll be out on your travels, but I just want to thank you again for your service to the commission. All right, Madam Chair, may I transition to the institution spotlight? Okay. Something I like to do more often for this commission is to, in the spirit of our mission, in the spirit of the strategic plan, highlight for you the greater enterprise for higher education. And that includes our public institutions, of course, but also our private institutions. One aspect that I'm betting is not so familiar to most of you or many in state government is that we have a line item in the appropriation bill every year. It's about $1.6 million. It is historic. It goes back decades. It's for contract education. Specifically, contract education provides Tennessee students with the opportunity to pursue academic programs at private institutions in the cases where access is limited due to size and or location of those programs, or where the programs are not offered in a public college or university. That 1.6 million right now is distributed to just 3 institutions: Meharry Medical for dentistry, Maryville College out east for sign language interpretation. I know. That's sort of wow. That's right. Yes. Hello, President Khan. And then also Southern College of Optometry or optometry. Dr. Reich has been really good about inviting THEC out to West Tennessee for many visits or for groundbreakings, as just recently occurred. And I took a tour of his institution back in the fall. Scott Sloan and I went out there. And I was just taken aback by what they do, not just for Tennessee residents to get their education, but also for Tennessee residents when it comes to optometry. They serve the community of Memphis in ways that completely blew me away. And I thought now would be a good opportunity for us to learn more about contract education, but also to hear from an institution that is served from it. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Louis Reich. He is the president of Southern College of Optometry, where he has served full-time since 2016 in an interim basis from 2015 before being full-time. And after joining the college in 2008 as vice president for academic affairs. A respected educator, research, and national leader in optometry, he has held key roles with the National Board of Examiners in Optometry, the American Academy of Optometry, and the Association of Schools and Colleges of Optometry. He also serves on the board alongside Commissioner Ragsdale on the Tennessee Independent Colleges and Universities Association Board, TCUA. He serves on the Tennessee Holocaust Commission, which is a governor-appointed position, and several Memphis community boards. He and his wife, Diane, live in Memphis, and it's an honor for me to introduce to you Dr. Reich. Dr. Reich?
Yeah, I'm on. Okay. Hi, my name is Louis Reich. I'm going to talk a little bit about Southern College of Optometry. But first, I want to thank the Tennessee Higher Education Commission for not only our partnership over the past few years that I've been president, well, 10 years that I've been president, but the support of our students. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact of that support. I really appreciate the hospitality. I appreciate dinner last night. It was a great opportunity to get to know some staff members and some commissioners a little bit better. So that was really, really exciting. I am not used to this format. There's more people behind me than in front of me. So I'm going to say what my late mother used to say all the time, excuse my back. Do I go ahead with this? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit. This is our tower. This is our tower in Midtown, Tennessee. It's lit up at night. We want to make sure that, well, actually, we replaced those lights very, very recently. When I first got there, I used to get bothered because instead of Southern College of Optometry, I swear it spelled out Other College of Optometry, and that did not work for me. So there are new lights. We could change the color of the symbol that's at Southern College of Optometry. Note that it's really pretty at night, but this 11-story tower was built about 1970. It was designed by Francis Ma. It is a great example of brutalist architecture, and it is sometimes a very brutal building, but that's one of the things that I want to talk about in a little bit. I thank you, Stephen, for mentioning my biography. My assistant said, well, before you start talking, let people know a little bit about you. So I'm not really used to doing this, but I will. Did I grow up in Tennessee? No, I came here as quickly as I could. As a matter of fact, I think I lived in Tennessee more than any other state in my background. That's coming up actually on that. Went to the University of California at Berkeley for my Doctor of Optometry. Berkeley is everything Berkeley is supposed to be. Did my PhD at the University of Houston, so I have both a professional doctorate and I have a PhD in vision science. Vision science research is what my background is. I don't use it on a regular basis any longer. I joined SCO in 2008. I became president of SCO in 2015. When I joined as the VPAA, Vice President for Academic Affairs, the succession plan said if something happens to the president, you're the president, at least on an interim basis. And I never thought that would happen. Yes, in April 1st, 2015, not an April Fool's Day joke, I became president. And you know what? I love the job. I didn't aspire to it. Everybody does it a little bit differently, but it's been an exceptional marriage for me. I've enjoyed everything about it. I love to brag about the school because as Stephen said, I think we do some really excellent work. We're not St. Jude, so we don't cure sick children, but we do cure sick eyes. So that's something that we are very proud of. I'm only the 7th president since SCO was founded, and it was founded a long time ago. We'll talk about that in a minute. Tell you a little bit of our statistics. We are nationally recognized as a top optometry school. We're either 1 or 2 in the nation based on a lot of our independent scoring. There are only now 25 of us. There used to be much less. When I started, there was only 16 optometry schools when I started at SCO. It seems to be something, at least educationally, that is growing, but we're the only one in Tennessee. And we're one of the largest programs in the United States. I think this year will actually be, in terms of enrollment, the largest program in the United States. We have a 98% board passage graduation rate and board passage rate. That's really important because nationally, a lot of our brethren or sister institutions are not featuring that. And it's really important if we invest in an education that our students graduate and are able to pay back their loans and be able to practice optometry, which is really what we're doing. We have 535 students in the 4 years of the program. It is a professional program. About 98, 99% of our students come in with a bachelor's degree. We've even had students with a PhD who've come in, law degree, different things. We have 46 states represented in Canada. We are truly attracting more students from across the United States than any other school. But we're situated in Tennessee, which I think is important now that I'm talking to the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. We now have 75 students from Tennessee in the program. So 75 out of 535. We have educated over 70% of the optometrists practicing in this state, even though there are other optometry schools. We have more students than in the past. So if I go back 3 or 4 years, we had less than 60, about 54, 55 students from Tennessee. I directly attribute this increase in Tennessee students to THEC funding. It's linear. It really is a very, very, very good relationship. What's really exciting is we have a record number of Tennessee students coming in the fall, 26 students in the program. And we've had as little about 10 years ago as 10 or 12 students. So this funding has really, really helped in terms of our recruitment in the state of Tennessee. So what is our Tennessee funding about? Well, we take our total amount, a corpus of THEC funding, divide it by the number of Tennessee students, really higher math here, but it's the funding per student. We give every dollar that gets given to us from the state of Tennessee or given to SCO to our Tennessee students. This year, it's worked out to nearly $14,000 per Tennessee student. That, you could do the math over 4 years. It's a 4-year professional program. Pretty soon, you're talking about big money, and it is big money. The average indebtedness for SCO for all students was about $136,000 last year. Why is that important? It's important because the national indebtedness last year was about $190,000. And data that I'm seeing from this year is well over $200,000 per year. So we're anywhere from $50,000 to in some cases, $100,000 on average less in terms of our total indebtedness. That is why we're attracting students from all around the country. We're a great value. We're in the city that is fairly reasonable to live in. Our tuition is kept on the low side on purpose. And about 80% of our students get some kind of aid to come to Southern College of Optometry. So we're very excited by that. It's very important to us. By the way, the average starting salary of our students when they graduate is about $150,000 per year. So it's more than their indebtedness. Some of it goes way up from there. It depends on where they want to practice and how they want to practice. What about us? We were established in 1932. Believe it or not, Memphis was chosen by its founder because we're a central place in the United States. And J.J. Horton, when he started this school in 1932, as a small for-profit institution, which we haven't been for 70 years, he looked at it, it's very, very central. And it had worked out that way. That's our original building on Washington Street. From what I understand, it was near where the Le Bonheur Children's Hospital is now. Old building that we just acquired. That was a building that was put up where we are now at 1245 Madison. This is a building that faced Union. It was knocked down way before I got there. And this is our 11-story tower that opened in 1970. You kind of see my office on the top floor. I get a great window view. It's wonderful. But it is an old building. The eye center is where we see our patients. We are here to educate young men and women in the art and science of optometry. However, we do that by seeing patients, and our students see a lot of patients. So this new clinical facility was built adjacent to the tower, opened in 2003. We just finished totally remodeling it because this building gets utilized a lot. We see over 50,000 patients a year. That is, sometimes I walk in the waiting room and it's totally full. We see between 300 and 400 patients a day in the eye center here. It gets very, very, very busy. We provide, so somebody comes to us and says, I don't have insurance. Now we accept like 700 different kinds of insurance, but we don't have insurance. What do I do? Well, we take care of them. We don't want to have anybody leave Southern College of Optometry without having necessary vision care. That means we give away about $1 million a year to patients who have no other way to pay for it. And that's part of our operating. We kind of use it to balance our budget. We want to make sure that we're able to do that. Our regional impact, we just finished a new economic impact study. Our regional impact between our students, our clinics is approaching $200 million a year. We're part of the Memphis Medical District Collaborative. We're part of THEC. I think we're the second smallest in terms of class size in THEC. Our budget is probably not the second smallest because we see so many patients in our clinic and it's expensive to operate. But we are part of that. I have been president of the Memphis Medical District Collaborative. I think I'm permanent secretary. I'm voluntold every year, can you be secretary? And I do it. Why? Because I believe in it and I believe in the city. So this, what we did in 2013 was we had a campaign just like we're doing now. It was a much more modest campaign. Our classroom was 1970. So we redid it and we added to it. We now have a classroom and preclinical lab facility complex that is huge. I mean, we have the ability, like a transformer, to have classes of 145 and we could go up to 600 people. So it means that we have the largest auditorium in the medical district. And when I look around at educational institutions in the city of Memphis, I think ours is the largest. So we often host other folks who want to come in. Department of Motor Vehicles do their training for gaze nystagmus for inebriated and other drivers at least once a year at our school, and we have other programs that come. So if THEC ever wants to have a meeting in Memphis, you're more than welcome to use our facilities. We've evolved to meet our students. That's what really is important, and that's why we're still evolving. So one of the things that we realized between a tower that's 50 some odd years old, a library that's that age, the fact that when you build a tower in 1970, you did two things that were really, really odd. One is we barely had any females. Our men outnumbered our women 10 to 1. So it winds up being women's rooms that are smaller than men's rooms. Now we have 70% of our students female and a lot of our staff and faculty. It doesn't work any longer. The women's rooms need some TLC, I could tell you that, in our tower. The other thing is when you built a building in 1970, electronics. What did you plug in? You plugged in lamps, you plugged in maybe an IBM Selectric now and then, and a vacuum cleaner. Well, we have an average of 3 computers per person right now because all of electronic medical records. So one of the things that we decided to do is update, and we needed to do that. We needed to do that to be competitive, and we needed to do that for our students. So I'll show you a little bit about what we did. We had our groundbreaking ceremony about a month ago. Scott, thank you for driving up. Commissioner Perry, thank you for being there. We had very, very nice representation from throughout the city. Luckily, it was a great day, and we were able to do that. We have a $35 million construction project. It's important to note we're not using tuition dollars for this. How are we doing it? Well, alumni donations and foundation support. And that's been very, very hard to do. I've been traveling a lot. I never thought this job, well, I never knew that this job involved as much fundraising. Welcome to the job. So I've spent a lot of time doing that. One of the great things is I just found out this week that we were able to secure a very, very large donation from one of our prominent alumni, which makes me smile ear to ear because it really relieves a lot of the pressure. New market tax credit, we're waiting to see how much. That's one thing when you do things and you find out that you can work with the city, you can work with the greater environment, and we have companies who are willing to invest in Memphis, especially where we are, which is an area that qualifies for new market tax credit. And we're going to do a low interest bond. So again, no tuition dollars. And it's important because we wanted to tell our students that, our alumni that, and we wanted to mean it. Students are very, very skeptical. They thought their money was going to that, and no, it is not. Last thing I want to do is show you just some sketches of what our new building is going to look like. It's actually the bigger picture to the left. That's the new library. We have an oculus on our tower. Francis Ma put a circle in there. It's supposed to be an iris, so our architects put an oculus on the library building, but it's expanded clinical space, mostly for kids. Our clinical population of children is expanding. If a child can't see, and we have almost 1 in 2 failure rate in Shelby County, and that's a real problem, a failure rate in terms of vision screening. So if a child can't see, they can't learn. So you could argue a lot of things about what's stopping children from learning in Shelby County, but I can tell you vision plays a large part of it, and a lot of people don't know that. We have new library and study spaces, new labs, our stores being relocated. That's very, very minor. But our first floor is being redesigned for students, and we're building a brand new atrium. We have terrible curb appeal right now. So one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we're trying to be not the best kept secret in Memphis, and enhancing our curb appeal with a new atrium is going to do that. And I tried to race through that. Hopefully I kept within my time, but I am available for any questions you have. And I, again, want to thank you for your attention and support.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reich. Any questions, comments?
2 is always better than 1. Everybody asks me that. No.
Yeah.
President Reich, can you talk about what relationship, if you do have one, is with UT Health Science Center?
We have a great relationship, and it is burgeoning. We don't have a formal relationship. Peter and I are fairly close. We talk a lot. We have worked a lot together on the Memphis Medical District Collaborative. He and I have been in a few podcasts and in a few board panels together. We're still talking about the formality of it. We work a lot with Hamilton Eye. We have in the past, and we still will. We put on CE together, for example, on a fairly regular basis. So the formality of our relationship still has to be worked out, but we do talk often, and we're always saying in the future, let's plan something together.
A follow-up, just to connect 2 data points. Secretary Hargan and I were marveling at the 46 states that are represented. I recall when I visited with you, a number of students coming from some of the Great Plains states. I don't remember where it was. And I asked you what draws them here to Memphis. And you mentioned that from your perspective, it's unlike most other schools, the Memphis population, which, as you said, 1 in 2 have vision impaired problems. These students get to work hands-on more than they would at other schools. So they get more experience working with the local community. Is that correct? Is that what you?
The fact that we are in the location that we are, I would say about 40% of our patient base has some kind of ocular or systemic disease, especially the adult patient base. Their diabetes is rampant, glaucoma is rampant. So our students, when they come, they're able to treat and to see patients like that. We're just able to enhance our laws for laser surgical procedures, and our students are participating in that right now under the direction of an ophthalmologist, but every student that graduates has performed at least one laser procedure. They're treating disease. The only thing that we're not doing, and that's why our students go on externships, is seeing a lot of 22-year-old nearsighted patients wanting contact lenses. We are seeing the pathological patients that if they see in their practice, patients like that, they're able to treat immediately. So that's one of our draws. The other draw that we have, frankly, is we have a very family-oriented approach to how we educate our students. When you join SCO, you become part of the SCO family. And if a student is from South Dakota, for example, one year we had 6 students from South Dakota. I swear that we got every 22-year-old in South Dakota to come to Southern College of Optometry that year. We do that because of the reputation that we had from another student who is from that state and said, come to SCO, it's a great environment. Now, some of our students will stay after they graduate, not only our Tennessee students, but some of our students from out of state. But the ones who go back home, which is the majority, take a little bit of Memphis with them, take a little bit of the South with them. And it's great to see when they come back for continuing education, because they all want to come back because they miss their favorite barbecue or their favorite restaurants or their favorite thing to do. So it's always exciting that not only do they come back, but service is one of the pillars of our strategic plan. So we inculcate our students in activities of service learning, so they bring that back to their communities as well. So they take a lot of Memphis with them, a lot of SCO with them. So yes.
I have 2 questions. Any other questions, the commissioner? 2 questions. What is the average age of an optometrist
Practicing or graduating from
practicing?
it's in the 50s.
Okay. I was just curious. The other question, I'm a little bit surprised to hear that 50% of the students, young kids, have some sort of eye challenges. What causes that? Is that normal across most urban environments, or?
Urban environments have a much higher rate of failure rate for vision screenings. Sometimes it's not cognitive, but learning. You know, we do have a vision screening that involves identification of optotypes or letters. Oftentimes it is uncorrected refractive error. Sometimes it's nutritional. Honestly, we have never done there hasn't been a real good study on that. It's disappointing though that 1 out of 2, almost about 40-something% of our students that go through vision screenings wind up failing.
Do you know if we're seeing that in all communities?
We're not seeing that in all communities. Usually it's about 10 to 12% of students that fail vision screenings. It's much higher in the city of Memphis than it is in a suburban setting somewhere.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
There's a multitude of reasons, and I would be conjecturing to say exactly if I knew why.
I look forward to eventually learning what the reasoning is. Great. Well, thank you very much. Yes. Yes.
That's interesting. So you contrasted that with suburban areas. If I were to look at Atlanta, Detroit, Chicago, would I find similar numbers there?
Honestly, I don't know which cities have which rates. I'd have to look it up. I know urban settings, especially poorer urban settings, have a much higher failure rate of vision screenings than it would be in more suburban areas. But I have not looked at other cities, so
okay.
I don't want to say something that is not accurate.
You said 1 out of 2, but then later on you said 40%. So
it's 40 to 50% depending on what school you go to.
Okay. All right. So what's happened with those numbers since the advent of the smartphone?
I don't know the answer to that.
But
I do know that
if I were to
myopia
look
has
at those
increased.
numbers 20 years ago, before practically everybody had some type of smartphone, or
Yeah.
what it seems like everybody does, you know, what comparison would we have back then? Would we have said 40 to 50%? Would we say 25 to 30%? Do we know?
I have no way of knowing that answer.
I mean, I think the factors you mentioned earlier all play a role, but I also believe that the fact that we have so much screen time now, and especially on these
Correct.
devices in our hands, cannot be helpful.
I will tell you, and we talked about it last night at dinner, that near work is definitely correlated highly with the amount of nearsightedness. So populations, civilizations that do a lot of near up close work tend to have more nearsighted children. And there is an environmental component, there is a genetic component. We can't control the genetic component because two nearsighted people, if they marry each other, will have nearsighted children generally, but there is a huge environmental component. So near work without appropriate rest, we encourage kids to go outside. There's a lot of studies that say that a child who spends time outside has arrested myopia development, nearsighted development, versus somebody who's just near work all the time. That data is out there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reich.
Thank you.
All right, so consent calendar. There are 2 items on the consent calendar, and without objection, we'll vote on them as a set. Are there any questions or objections? If not, then I'll entertain a motion in a second.
So moved. I move to approve.
Madam Secretary.
Chairwoman Scarlett,
Aye.
Commissioner Allman,
Aye.
Commissioner Dieter. Aye. Commissioner Matlock,
Aye.
Commissioner Perry,
Aye.
Commissioner Rader,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Wood.
Aye.
Secretary Hargett. Treasurer Lillard.
Aye.
Comptroller Mumpower. Chairwoman, you have 10 ayes.
Motion carries. Thank you. So moving on to the regular calendar, the first item on the agenda is a legislative update. Lou Hanneman, who's our Chief of External Relations, and Colleen Ellis, Director of State Government Relations, provide an overview. Lou, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commission members. Good to be back in front of you for another legislative update. After this, the 114th General Assembly adjourned sine die on April 23rd, closing out a 2-year cycle and heading into, of course, a special session, which we have now moved through and are now looking forward to an election cycle coming up through the fall and leading up to kind of getting this whole thing started off yet again in January. Themes for this year. This has actually not been a terrible year for higher education before the General Assembly, aside from some overarching themes around tenure, free speech, and other matters, financial aid, lottery funding, and so forth, which we'll get into in detail. For the most part, higher education stayed out of the way of the larger issues facing the General Assembly. Pharmacy benefit management, which that's about as all I know about that issue, is the name of it. Expansions to the Education Freedom Scholarships, which our state board colleagues probably know a great deal about. Those were the big themes moving through this year, in addition to just funding concerns and revenue concerns overall. That being said, we did have a few issues, and I'll dive into 2 particular legislative areas and then turn it over to Colleen Ellis to kind of walk through the rest of the legislation that impacted higher education this year. For us, and I know that Dr. Gentile and Pete and Tim will get into the lottery situation later on, but there were a lot of conversations this year around lotteries, particularly around the revenue side of things. Earlier this January, really in December, we began to get a better picture of how the lottery funding would be framed in the budget document. For the first time, maybe for the first time explicitly, the sports wagering funds, which we have used to make whole the lottery over the last few years, would no longer be considered a revenue source specifically and couldn't be accounted for in that way. This was a change for us and did require us to make an effort to message this properly to the General Assembly. So we reached out to Treasurer Lillard, to Commissioner Bryson, Budget Director Thurman, as well as the finance chairs early in January to work through how do we talk about this issue and what are some steps that we can take right now to mitigate the possibility that the lottery could be insolvent this year, potentially and almost assuredly next year. That really helped us to kickstart conversations with members directly, letting them know what the revenue situation looked like, putting them at ease about having to overhaul the entire lottery in the current year, but teeing them up for conversations that have already begun and will continue through the fall about what a lottery corrective action could look like over the next year or more. Beyond that conversation, which did help us with messaging, there was another thread of conversations that the legislature was having around the revenues coming into lottery, particularly that related to the 80% of the privilege tax for sports wagering. How is that being managed? But also threats to the sports wagering revenue streams were a big topic of conversation. You may have heard about the predictive betting, which actually functions in a lot of ways more like securities, investments rather than a typical gaming, which has then, of course, led to litigation. A lot of that conversation was kind of put on hold until next year, pending some of that litigation as states around the country are trying to sort out how do we regulate these companies coming in and effectively doing the work of gambling concerns, but aren't really structured like gambling concerns. And so more to come on that as they sort through it. In a similar way, the Lottery Corporation faced a lot of questions this year before the finance committees on revenue generation, indicators as to why perhaps lottery funding has declined in recent years. Some of that is due, of course, to the sports wagering by their account, but also into a drop off in the number of Powerballs and the large size, multi-state lottery programs. I think from last year to this year, there were a number of Powerball drop off, and that has led to, a significant drop in funding. Last year, we saw about a $70 to $80 million drop in overall lottery funding. This year, they've begun to make a little bit of that ground back, but not sufficient to make up where they fell to in the prior year. And so we are looking at a very tight funding situation for this current fiscal year, which again, Stephen and Pete will break that news to you in just a little bit. From my perspective, for the Lottery Corporation, there was legislation passed this year that completely vacated their board. There has been a trend, which I'll also touch on again here relative to THEC, in recent years of redoing or restructuring these governing boards along a new model of equal appointing authority across the governor and the two speakers. This was done for the Lottery Corporation effective July 1. Their board will be vacated with 3 members from the governor, 3 from each of the respective senators. And in this case, their entire board was vacated. They weren't simply transitioned to new appointing authority. And so come July 1, they'll have a whole new structure. In addition to that, there were some accountability measures put in place around the salaries and compensation for the administrative staff, all the way up through the CEO and president, as well as an additional provision around their audit transparency for public record. Finally, one last piece of lottery legislation that did pass was a piece of legislation that we've known about for some time, brought by the Treasurer's Office to effectively transition from the annual sweep into the Tennessee Promise account to a capped sweep should those funds actually be there. You may recall when Tennessee Promise came on, in order to build up that endowment to a place where it was sustainable, where earnings could pay for the program, we swept every last dollar after expenditure into the Promise account. This legislation essentially says in a year where there is, lottery proceeds up to and not more than $10 million will be swept into Promise. The balance will stay in the lottery education accounts. This was a piece of legislation brought by Chairman Scott Spickey and Chairman Bo Watson. I mentioned, this new model of governing board, work. THEC was the target of this particular piece of legislation, effective July 1, or actually effective upon becoming law. Our commission has now rolled to a 3-3-3, and in this case, an additional 3 because of the constitutional officers as well as our student, who will still be appointed by the governor and the State Board of Education, who's ex officio non-voting. That does not, the way they transitioned our commission this time around does not impact any of the current appointments to the commission. However, as the various gubernatorial appointments roll off, those will then transition over to the respective speakers until we've reached that balance of 3, 3, and 3. And so all of you will continue to serve out your current terms under your existing appointing authority until such a time as your normal term would have been up. Two other provisions that were brought in this legislation. One, Stephen referenced earlier, is this notion of transitioning to an on-time graduation rate. You may recall several years ago when the formula was under review, we did make an effort to go to a four-year graduation rate. There was a lot of concern raised by the institutions and others at that time, and so we tabled that conversation. I will say that in our conversations with legislators over the last few years, how well the formula is producing students to graduate on time has been a very hot topic of conversation. I think it's most evidenced in this ultimate legislation, which kind of took the situation out of our hands and said, no, graduation rates will be on time, and on time means 4 years for universities and 2 years for community colleges. As a note, the community colleges don't have graduation rate as a metric per se, and so it doesn't really impact the outcomes-based funding formula for them in that regard, but it does for the universities. In a similar way, the use of, as you know, you're about to discuss the tuition rate coming up, and one of those discussion points will be an exception to that tuition range. One provision in this legislation that was key is that any institution that fails to progress in their graduation rate, their on-time graduation rate, is not eligible in that year for that exception. And so, you know, really the effort here, the push here, the focus is to incentivize and encourage institutions to push forward on that graduation rate, which, you know, by all accounts should be, you know, it should be possible. Transitioning to that 4-year, all of our institutions have growth rate, you know, potential in that range. And so, you know, meeting that expectation, certainly in the short term, should not be too much of an issue. Finally, the last component of this legislation tried to address originally with a punitive response the growth in out-of-state students. In a lot of conversations with the sponsors on this, it was kind of transitioned over to more, you know, institutions should have a policy for how the revenues generated from out-of-state growth should help to mitigate or offset the cost to Tennessee residents to pursue in-state tuition. The institutions all have, you know, budget policies and operationalized, you know, approaches to how they use that out-of-state revenue. They simply have to document that and then provide that to appropriate parties. That is the single biggest, you know, piece of higher education legislation this year, aside from a piece of legislation that we brought, which was more technical in nature. And so I'll close off there before inviting Colleen up and invite any questions about, you know, the lottery discussions, but also perhaps this legislation. I know that Scott and his team have begun to think through how that transition piece works with communicating to the speakers. And so would invite any questions in that regard.
Anyone have any questions? Comments? Yes, Nathan.
I'll just make a couple of remarks, Madam Chairman and members, to tell you how well, obviously, you know, you're represented tremendously well at the state capitol. But to the point that when your folks walk into the room, the expectation, what everyone knows, is that they're going to get the truth. It's going to be straightforward. And that the folks that you send to the Capitol to represent the interests of this commission and students broadly and the education enterprise in this state is always well looked after. Obviously, I consider both of you as friends, but also colleagues that I love to find an excuse to work with, because when they walk in with an excellent reputation that is extremely well earned. And I just had to point that out.
I appreciate that. It's interesting you mentioned that. It occurred to me this morning as I was thinking about the makeup of our commission. And one of the things that Colleen will talk about is the loss of some friends in our legislature who have decided to retire, but who have been great champions for higher education. Almost the entire body of institutional knowledge about legislation and laws that impact higher education are in this room. You know, whether it's Pete and Tim, who have been kind of managing the financial aid side, Scott, myself, Comptroller, Secretary Hargett, Treasurer Lillard. This is the institutional knowledge for higher education law and policy, and financial aid in particular, in this state. And so that's pretty powerful.
Thank you, Lou. So looking at our agency legislation this year, if you remember last year, we brought a bill that really reimagined our work here as the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. This year, even though it was 10 pages long, we truly just worked on clarifying and cleaning up our code going in to this kind of new era. So we removed outdated programs, think the Christy McAuliffe Scholarship, or reports that have already been completed, things of that nature. We also strengthened our compliance authority surrounding financial aid, allowing the THEC to look at institutions who are non-compliant and kind of have a tiered layer of enforcement policies for our financial aid rules. We also modernized our TSAA eligibility in an era of a lot of online institutions coming into the state and things of that nature. We wanted to ensure that our need-based aid first and foremost goes to students who are going to institutions that are local and domiciled to the state. We added rotating Tennessee transfer pathway reviews, kind of in line with our master plan, really trying to advertise and make sure our pathways are strong. We added new technical pathways as we kind of move into a workforce Pell era. And then we also added a campus designation, similar to the VETS designation that we discussed earlier, called transfer-friendly campuses, to make sure, our campuses that are really honing in their skills of getting students from 2-year to 4-year are recognized. We also updated some reporting deadlines that were date certain in code to annually. This is to make sure that we can have the most robust data before we publish these reports. That way, if there's any delays or things of that nature, we can ensure that we can adjust accordingly. We went through also the sunset review process this year. So THEC and TBR received a 4-year extension. The Tennessee State University received a 3-year extension. The Tennessee Council for Career and Technical Education, housed administratively within TBR, received a 1-year extension. And then the TSAC Board of Directors was repealed from code in line with the bill we passed last year to allow you guys to become the
Virginia.
board
Normally companies would
of that agency.
have you seen the morning paper?
All right, so now we're going to transition to the main themes we saw in higher education in policy this year, one of those being tenure. At the beginning of the session, many tenure bills were filed, kind of ranging from completely outlawing tenure in the state to looking at how we can modernize tenure discipline. And this one bill, Public Chapter 761, is what came out of the legislature regarding tenure. So what this bill says is that disciplinary kind of action and kind of rules need to be continued and contemplated completely separately from tenure, right? So it's saying that regardless of your tenure status, you are kind of beholden to this set disciplinary policy. While there is still due process contemplated in this new tenure kind of landscape, the faculty senate no longer has kind of a say in disciplinary action that falls on the president or the chief academic officer of an institution. There is still notice given to the faculty member if this process will begin. However, starting July 1, judicial review will now completely be taken out of the process. There was kind of a long preamble to this bill that really spoke to the legislature's commitment to tenure in this state, that they want to still keep it an active kind of puzzle in our higher education landscape. but they wanted to see kind of discipline be reformed in that. So this did pass and is effective July 1. Looking at some other higher education initiatives that passed, we have the Higher Education Purchasing Act, which allows our private institutions to enter into state collaborating purchasing contracts, much like our public institutions do. From our lens, our HBCUs will be able to utilize this, which will help them greatly in those large purchasing. It can be anything from, paper towels all the way to computers or anything in between. So I know a lot of our institutions, our private HBCUs, are excited about this one. There was a bill passed that changed the confirmation procedure for our LGI boards. So currently, a board member can be appointed by the governor or their appointing body and serve immediately, and their service goes until they are adversely acted upon by the General Assembly, meaning the resolution is voted up or down. This bill passed stating that they cannot serve until the General Assembly confirms them. However, this was vetoed by the governor, so we are still operating in the status quo of serving until adversely acted upon at this time. The Comptroller's Office also brought a bill. There was, as we spoke about last year, institutions and state agencies have to certify that they are in compliance with our DEI prohibition laws. That was just kind of calling for an annual compliance. This bill strengthened that code to say a date certain, I believe January 1st. They have to prove compliance to this. We also had the Charlie Kirk Act passed. This bill really is centered around freedom of speech on campus. So it has prohibitions against disrupting speakers, not inviting speakers based on their viewpoints. And it also protects freedom of expression by faculty and students. And it does codify the Calvin Report from the University of Chicago into code. Lastly, there is a piece of legislation brought by the Department of Corrections that requires an inmate upon intake into our state correctional prisons and on an annual basis to have an educational assessment and then be provided within 90 days in writing their educational options. So our reentry folks are working directly with corrections to ensure that they are kind of in lockstep about, okay, what inmates are ready for higher education and how can we serve them during their time. Next, I'm going to talk about significant initiatives that were introduced but did not advance. So there was many pieces of firearm legislation brought, ranging from allowing carry on campuses to expanding carry in public from handguns to long guns and things of that nature. A lot of our institutions were engaged on these initiatives with sponsors, more just to talk about unintended consequences for our campuses. And so these did not advance in this session. There was also an expansion for WGU, Western Governors University, of the Strong Act. While the Strong Act is a scholarship for guardsmen that is administered by the Department of Military, we are always watching scholarship expansions, even if they are scholarships we don't administer, just to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on, especially in the light of our lottery situation, that we are sure, okay, where are we expanding? How are we expanding? Are we expanding smartly? So that did not move on. I think just a testament to the legislature's understanding of our aid landscape and to take a kind of a cautious approach moving forward. There was also a bill regarding workforce Pell that further kind of tailored who would advise the governor on workforce Pell program approvals, and it just kind of tailored it to the state workforce board, kind of leaving higher education as a whole, including the commission, out of the process. This did not move forward, so we are still able to work with the Department of Labor to look at how we will prepare for that July 1 start of workforce Pell. Lastly, there was a bill that came out of the Governor's Stars and Stripes Council to expand in-state tuition eligibility for our military spouses and dependents, more looking at a niche population where the military member does not live in the state, but their dependents do, and they are residents. This did not move forward, just once again, taking a pause on all things expansion while we kind of assess the tuition and aid situation. Now I will turn to the budget. Looking first at our agency improvements, we did receive $2 million to expand our reentry program. We had a very successful outreach day, an inaugural outreach day on the Hill this year, where we took our reentry coordinators, our Reconnect, our, let's say, Gear Up, Advise, statewide services, all to member offices just to talk about what they do either in their district or in their region. And they were thrilled to hear the way THEC is working to get all kinds of students into higher education in the way that we're doing it at a pretty low cost model. And so I think while this was originally included in the governor's budget, that those conversations helped solidify the need for this expansion. So we're super excited about that. And we also got some non-recurring agency improvements, expansions to the rural healthcare pathway program and to nuclear workforce funding. Looking at the outcomes funding did not change from the governor's budget to the final codified budget by the General Assembly, meaning that our outcomes funding were, based out of the formula was not fully funded. I will say the budget's focus was very much on recurring dollars for 10 care hospital buybacks. I will not pretend to be able to explain exactly the intricacies of that, but that was $137 million recurring to go support a lot of our rural and safety net hospitals. So that did eat up a lot of the recurring funding, kind of looking at the budget as a whole. I'm not going to go through these whole slides. I just wanted you to have them. One thing I wanted to point out on this is a recurring infusing of dollars to the Gatton Pharmacy. The Gatineau College of Pharmacy has been going after this funding for a long time to ensure that they do not have to dip into reserves as they serve this area of the state through pharmacy. And they were able to get this $3.2 million of funding that will allow them to continue operating and accepting students at their current capacity and hopefully an expanded capacity in the future. Looking at non-recurring institutional improvements, we got a lot of great infusions for very exciting initiatives, looking at apprentice labs, mobile training labs, nuclear and cyber technologies, innovation labs, and a supercomputer for TTU. And then lastly, an infusion for University of Memphis for their law school students for scholarships. So a lot of non-recurring institutional improvements across our higher education landscape. Looking at capital projects, we once again saw a lot of bonded projects in the budget. One that was both bonded and state funded was the UT Health Science Center revitalization in Memphis. That is something that they have been advocating for to serve that area of the state in their medical school. And then we also see some smaller programs, as you see, campus infrastructure, business and economics in Memphis, and then the UT Martin Cattle Outreach and Workforce Facility. There were 21 capital maintenance projects funded at $71.7 million. That breakdown you can see, 8 across our LGIs, 5 across the UT system, and 8 at TBR, and then we also had a recurring maintenance infusion of $49.8 million. Lastly, as Lou mentioned, we are seeing some retirement of some strong companions in the higher education space, notably Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally. His fingerprints are all over the higher education landscape as we know it. And after 37 years in the General Assembly, he will be retiring, so he will be greatly missed. Chairman Jeremy Faison, he served for majority party leadership, and he is out of East Tennessee and a huge advocate for our advise work, and he will be retiring. Representative Johnny Garrett out of Sumner County is running for Congress, so he will be, he served his last days in the General Assembly. And then lastly, Representative Monty Fritz, he was a vocal advocate on the Education Committee who is retiring as well. I'm ready to, if you guys have any questions.
Any questions for guests?
Thank you, Colleen, to you and to Lou before you. The one bill you mentioned about the certification of the DEI was not a comptroller bill.
Oh, my apologies.
But it did require the comptroller's office to do something. So, you know, the legislature is all about, if it's in session, either having something done for you or something done to you.
Very true.
As a former member of the legislature. But that bill did arise out of frustration of a lack of certification. So we will, in the comptroller's office, be looking for all of you who are auditees, you institutions of higher education, we will be looking for that written certification that you are in compliance with the DEI law as a part of your annual audit. So that's going to happen soon. So if you're not prepared for that, you need to be preparing for that right now. Going back to what Lou talked about and what Stephen talked about earlier, I have been describing the lottery as the iceberg, the looming iceberg out there. And the difference between us and the Titanic is we see it, we know it's coming. And I can tell you behind the scenes, I have been with legislative leadership as they've contemplated different solutions to the problem that's caused by declining lottery revenues, declining sports gaming revenues, and the face of an unregulated prediction market environment. I hope maybe there's a Supreme Court case pending in June that might give us some relief on that prediction market. Everybody needs to hope for that. But very good reports, and I just wanted to be sure and bring that bit of clarification and awareness for all of you who will need to be filing that certification in regard to the DEI. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Comptroller. Any other questions or comments? Colleen, I've got two questions for you. You mentioned the tuition for military spouses and dependents. The dependents, if they graduate from a high school in Tennessee, still have access to the scholarships in Tennessee, correct?
Correct.
It's just the spouse is a challenge? Okay.
Yes.
In regards to the tenure, I just want to make sure I understand this. So if a professor is tenured and they do something bad, their tenure becomes irrelevant and they're disciplined appropriately by their leader, manager.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next item on our agenda is the Tennessee Student Assistant Corporation revenue. Dr. Gentile will provide us an update and then answer any questions.
I'll be brief so we can get on with our action items here. But just want to provide a moment here to update on that iceberg that the comptroller mentioned a second ago. Before I do, I want to thank, going back to the last session, our partners at Department of Finance and Administration, Greg Turner's here, for helping us with the budget this year. And we mentioned government relations staff. I also want to give a nod to our institutions who've got government relations staff. We work very closely with them, as well as Tennessee Achieves and SCORE. Looking at the THEC revenue update, back in February, I mentioned to you basically the background information here. I won't go into this right now with you, but this was in the governor's budget, and it predicted about you're not going to see this number up there, but what I shared with you was like $114 million deficit between expenditure and revenue coming out of this year. And I mentioned back in February some optimism. Q1, Q2 revenue from lottery was higher than what the projections here for net lottery proceeds of 4 or 5 million was projecting. Q3, I'm going to skip through this plan here. Q3 update, we got this about a month ago. It was less rosy. Whereas in Q1, 112 million, Q2, 114 million, Q3 was 93.7 million. If you look at your materials, sheet 3 is the exact email attachment that we got from the Lottery Corporation. What you see for the Powerball was a net of about $47 and $51 million for Q1 and Q2. That helps contribute to what we saw of 112 million, 114 million of the net lottery proceeds. What you see in Q3 is that decline down from about 50 million to down to 17 million for Q3. The big change there is in Q1 and Q2, you had big Powerballs, jackpots approaching $1 billion. Did not have that in Q3. I find myself looking at the jackpots now every day to see what's happening in Q4 to try to get some reading of the tea leaves of where we might land. We did receive, we requested from the Lottery Corporation an update on what they're projecting close out with Q4. That brought me some more optimism. We got that yesterday. They're projecting still in the ballpark of where they were projecting about 440 million, which is if you look down here, what was passed by the state funding board was a projection of 405 million. If we're in the ballpark of 440 million by the end of this year, we'll probably be in a good spot. If not, as a reminder, if we have to dip into the $100 million reserve That means we've dipped through the $10 million reserve that does not need to be paid back. If we dip into the $100 million reserve, automatically there's a pro rata reduction applied to the scholarships. This never happened before. The iceberg that the comptroller has mentioned, we're all aware of the iceberg that's coming when it comes to out years. And right now, at the request of the chairs of education from Senate and House, we are working on recommendations to provide to you later this year in time for session for next year to address scholarship levels starting in fiscal year 28 and the scholarship programs. But there is a chance, an outside chance, that we'll have to do some type of reduction for fiscal year 27. If this comes, we'll let you know immediately. We'll gather stakeholders as we get more information, and then communicate out a plan as we get the new fiscal year numbers in July. It is my hope that it does not come to this. However, as we discussed yesterday in the Finance Committee, this is what has informed our staff recommendation on tuition. Our tuition model pointed to about 6 to 7%. We have gone with a 4.5%, recognizing that a potential decline, reduction in lottery levels could equate at some institutions to about a 1.5% increase in tuition just with that lower scholarships. I'll pause there and welcome any questions or concerns you might have on this matter.
Any questions or comments for Dr. Gento? Yes, Commissioner.
So what does an institution do if we reach the shortfall? I mean, we basically have if not a legal, ethical contract with the student that these funds, or do we? That these funds are available. Does it mean that the student, what happens?
Well, sir, that's an excellent question, and us treading into water that we've never tread into before. And that is what those next steps are for the communication plan. I'm honoring those commitments to the students, at least to the commitment to their access and completion to college, and how that works with the packaging of financial aid. I don't have an answer for you at this time, but we have talked about, like, again, we won't know until mid-July where we ultimately land on expenditures and revenues. Schools start shortly thereafter. How does that communicate out? A dip of, let's say the worst case scenario that was in that projection from the State Funding Board of $16.5 million dip into that $100 million reserve. That's about a 3% decline in lottery scholarship levels, which is not good. It's not a magnitude, however, that we would see in future years when we address the scholarships. But right now, I'm in the welcoming of your perspective and guidance on how we walk into that.
It's a big question.
It is a big question.
I mean, I don't think we want our students to be
Well,
left hanging.
I guess the right thing to do, Director, is that we do some scenario planning with the help of some of our institutions' finance people as to if, when, what we would go through, because I don't think that there is anybody in this room who does not believe that the student should be held harmless until the next contractual arrangement as to what their Pell Grant would be or what their scholarship grants would be or any of those possibilities. But to do some scenario work as to what would we do to get through to the end of the fiscal year and who would be responsible for what. Because would imagine, as I look around the CFOs in this room, you're not sitting on a pile of cash that you're ready to pay into helping meet that gap, nor do you have any kind of sense of what that would mean. But I think that it's prudent for us to be ahead of that with the hope that we never use the plan.
Yes, sir. And that, we did have last week about a 6-hour offsite retreat with our leadership team, and that was the first thing, is to get the projections from the Lottery Corporation, which again, tips are more towards optimism right now, and then to work with stakeholders at the state level and institutions on developing that. And that's an excellent, Commissioner Rader.
And I certainly think that those comments should be included as we talk about potential tuition increases and what the commission's recommendation as it relates to those in the face of students receiving less than they anticipated already. I think it's extremely relevant in our broader conversations to come.
Thank you, sir.
Your comments or questions?
I have, I guess, a kind of question, but I don't know how feasible this is because it would fall more on the institution's approach as opposed to like THEC's authority with this. At least for me as a student, and what I've seen from my other students, when we get our statements in like August, July, whatever, have a couple weeks to pay them, usually our like financial aid office or whatever it is, if you try and call them and get in contact with them, you're going to be sitting on hold for a long amount of time because every other like 10,000 other people are calling them. Is there a way that we can, like, given this potential of a shortfall for funding for students, is there a way that we can suggest to institutions to maybe extend some of those deadlines? And like, I don't know if that's something that is within our authority or anything, but just to put some of the ease off of students, even though that would put more of a burden on institutions when it shouldn't. I don't know if that makes
It does, and
sense,
thank you.
but
Thank you.
I know a lot of people, like, at least for me, get their statement and kind of freak out about how much they owe and how they're going to pay it. And so it's already stressful, and this would make it seemingly even more stressful. I don't know.
The best thing that we can do in the tool in our toolkit for that is providing guidance to institutions on any ambiguity that they might be facing. And we do that through Pete's leadership here and Tim's leadership and others on their team, and working through TASFA, which is the Tennessee Association of State Financial Aid, Student Financial Aid Association. What we don't like to hear are institutions holding up because of any ambiguity from the state on communication and what might get in the way. So what we do, and we do our best to do, is communicate through our institutions. Look, this is the situation. If you're running into situations A through Z, here's the right protocol from the state perspective on that. And we also we field lots of calls at our agency to help students navigate through that too. So we'll do our best to communicate out.
Well, hopefully with a combination of what THEC will focus on and your open request to institutions to think about how the financial aid office operates, we will see some changes coming up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next items on our agenda are the 6 new academic programs. So Commissioner Wood will provide an overview of the academic programs and the committee's recommendations. Commissioner Wood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Access Academics and Student Success Committee met yesterday to consider 6 proposed academic programs. We heard from Dr. Zomchik from UTK about their Bachelor of Science in Bioinformatics and their Masters of Science program in Retail Hospitality and Tourism Management. We heard from Dr. Kimberly McCorkle from ETSU about their Hospitality and Tourism Management Bachelor of Business Administration and their Environment, Health, and Disaster Science Master of Science program. We heard from Dr. Aldridge from Middle Tennessee State about their Mechatronic Systems Engineering Master of Science program, and then from Dr. Cohen with Tennessee Tech about their Integrative Biology Doctor of Philosophy degree. All 6 programs were unanimous recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Wood. Any questions about these programs or comments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion in a second. Can we get a motion?
Motion.
Madam Secretary.
Chairwoman Scarlett,
Aye.
Commissioner Allman,
Aye.
Commissioner Dieter,
Aye.
Commissioner Matlock, Commissioner Perry,
Aye.
Commissioner Rader,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Wood,
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard,
Aye.
Comptroller Mumpower.
Yes.
Chairwoman, you have 9 ayes.
Wonderful. Motion carries. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the committee that did so much good work on that. Question as to our new policy of having the executive director review and approve these programs. That was an awful healthy list of programs there that were seemingly quickly unanimously approved. What prevented you from acting on those particular programs?
Mr. Comptroller, thank you for that question. The policy as adopted by this commission was for as new programs come into the pipeline. These programs were in the pipeline as the policy was being considered. We do have our first delegated program that I alluded to a couple of weeks ago via email to you, but didn't want to mess up with these proceedings here that we'll email out to you coming out of Tennessee Tech right now. So as new programs come in and they surface to meet the needs in those policies, they'll be approved or not by the executive director.
Thank you.
I would just also like to flag the previous conversation we had about the lottery scholarship and about potential tuition increases that this commission is going to be voting on, which I don't believe is appropriate right now in the economic environment. But as these universities explore adding these new programs, I would just like to keep any money that they spend on the new programs in mind versus how they're going to receive that money. And if it's because of tuition increases, I would maybe encourage them to delay starting these programs until we have a better understanding of our economic environment and not necessarily just immediately pass those on to the students who clearly might not have the lottery funds that they thought they would.
Okay. Let's talk more about money. The next item on our agenda is the binding tuition fee policy. Treasurer Lillard will provide an overview of this agenda item and the committee's recommendation. Treasurer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Your committee met yesterday on this item and other matters, and the staff presented its research on this, and there's papers in your documents about it that describe the history of the entire thing and what the tuition model would suggest as an increase. However, the staff recommended a 4.5% maximum increase in tuition and combined tuition and mandatory fees for in-state undergraduate students at universities, community colleges, and TCATs, and the committee adopted that. And I move its approval.
Any other questions or further discussion? Okay, Madam Secretary?
Chairwoman Scarlett,
Aye.
Commissioner Allman,
Aye.
Commissioner Dieter,
Aye.
Commissioner Perry,
Aye.
Commissioner Rader, Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Wood,
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard,
Aye.
Comptroller Mumpower.
Yes.
Chairwoman, you have 8 ayes and 1 nay.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the tuition. Yes.
Not to belabor things, but I just think an important point, because I, again, was in that committee meeting yesterday. To talk about a percentage is sometimes innocuous, and you need to look below that sometimes at what it actually means. At ETSU, if they follow what they plan, $189 per semester. At Tennessee Tech, $225 per semester. At MTSU, $248.50 per semester. At Tennessee State, $212 per semester. At the University of Memphis, $252 per semester. At University of Tennessee at Knoxville, $0 for in-state students. And at Austin P, $197 per semester. And you take that and you extrapolate that over a 5-month semester. Those are very modest increases. Truthfully, I wonder if they're in this business environment and the inflationary pressure from a business perspective, significant enough. But I do recognize, other pressures that are out there. But I just wanted to put those dollar amounts in mind for the per semester cost. Again, it's when you put a dollar on it, fairly modest. It is important to remember we're talking about we're still speculating about the impact of the lottery. I think for this year, I think for sure next year we're going to have a plan in place. But anyway, I just wanted to mention those dollar amounts. Thank you. On the screen, yeah. Thank you.
Again, I think just kind of tying some of this together is, the reduced scholarships, the lottery dollars not being available, but also the increased tuition and fees, which you mentioned. What is I don't know if there's an average understanding of what loans students have after they graduate. What is the indebtedness for Tennessee students?
The average loans for our students, this is actually true across most of higher education, has been relatively flat with regards to inflation over the last 10 years. Ballpark of anywhere between $20,000 and $35,000, including our private institutions on that too. The total tuition increases at our institutions have been at just below CPI, and that is true for higher education across the land. Even here, these are maximum charges. We know that what I'm hearing from UT is that there'll be a 0% increase at UT Knoxville and I believe a 3% increase at UT Chattanooga, Martin, and Southern. That has been true for a lot of our institutions where though we set that cap, a lot of our institutions are falling well below that. And the debt that we've seen from our institutions, average student debt, has been relatively flat. Community colleges, due to Tennessee Promise, are below their sector average across the country. That's a fact book page I'll be happy to send around afterwards. Universities are at average and some institutions are above average on debt.
Is there any way to forecast this out into the future, looking at the job market over the next 10 to 15 years, salaries, and where our graduates are going to in Tennessee?
We will have a really good graph starting in June on where our graduates are going with the U.S. Census database that we're plugging into that we'll be able to see in June on how much money they're actually making. Yes.
Is that something we can forecast in the future as well?
I'll need to talk with my team about the ability to forecast in the future, but we'll look into it.
Okay, tuition and fee policy, the 26-27 separate tuition and fee policy request. The next item on our agenda is for institutions to make separate tuition and fee policy requests. Dr. Gentile, have we received a request?
We have received a request. It's from Tennessee Tech University in order to make way for a mandatory fee charge on parking. As mentioned by, I believe it was Lou who talked about this in the bill that passed recently. An institution that seeks an exception must have increase in their on-time completion rate, 4-year graduation rate, in order to be considered. And just to verify for Tennessee Tech, for the numbers that are under speculation, they have met that and have seen increases. But beyond that, I will leave it to Dr. Phil Oldham is on here to speak, but also Clarice Stinson, the CFO, Vice President of Finance at Tennessee Tech, to present the matter.
Dr. Oldham, you are recognized. I don't know that we can hear you. There we go.
Yeah. Thank you. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. If it's okay with the commission, I'll let Dr. Stinson go through a presentation, then I'll follow up with some comments and answer any questions you might have.
Dr. Stinson?
Thank you. So Tennessee Tech is submitting for your consideration an overall, I'm short, I guess. So Tennessee Tech is submitting for your consideration an overall tuition and mandatory fee range of up to 5.7%, which is an exception to the 4.5 just approved. Our major initiative leading to this request is the construction of a parking garage on the interior of our campus. We are requesting to increase our mandatory fee by $100 per semester to fund the construction of 800 plus parking garage and support transportation infrastructures on campus. This includes providing campus shuttles, improvements to sidewalks, roads, parking lots, and general transportation costs. We estimate that we'll be able to reduce the cost of enforcements by about $100,000 with this plan. As our enrollment has grown, campus parking for students has become much more limited and a source of frustration for our students. We've had discussions with members of our Student Government Association, and they have indicated a strong desire for a parking garage dedicated to student parking, and that's what we're proposing. If this is approved, we have proposed to eliminate our current non-mandatory fee of $260 annually that students pay for parking permits. By spreading the cost of our transportation infrastructure over the entire student population, this would reduce the cost for all students while also providing much needed transportation infrastructure for all students. With the approval of this proposal, we would limit our tuition increase to 4.3%. The 4.3% would mean that we would still need to do some cost-saving measures in order to make the match for the 1.5% salary pool and to fund our faculty promotions and the increasing costs that we're experiencing with software contracts, our utilities, and just general operating expenses. So at this point, Dr. Oldham, you wanted to speak, and then we'll be glad to answer questions.
Dr.
Okay.
Oldham?
Thank you. I appreciate being with you today. And what I want to try to address real quickly is what I would perceive, at least, as maybe some major concerns that some of the commissioners might have, namely opposition in general to any student fee increase, which I understand. Also concerns around making an exception in this particular case. And finally, parking and transportation being part of a mandatory fee. Let me start out with a statement that we really live by here at Tennessee Tech, and that's our promise to the students. We call it the Wings Up Way. And that's a promise that we put students first in every decision that we make. And we do that pretty consistently, and this is no exception. And we don't take this lightly when we come to you for an exception. This is a student-centered proposition, and it's really putting students at the heart of what we're trying to do at Tennessee Tech. So, as Dr. Stinson has indicated, parking and campus transportation has been a major and very consistent complaint of our students for a significant period of time, number of years. And we've been working with student leadership over those years to try to identify potential remedies for that would be acceptable. And this particular plan, although not yet approved by our own Board of Trustees, which I think is important to note, our Board of Trustees will have an opportunity to weigh in on this as well. But this plan addresses that. Their number one request that the students have is a parking garage in the central part of campus, and that's what we'll be able to do. They are also calling for stricter enforcement for violations of parking on campus. of those. Since we're in a more rural area, we don't benefit from having local mass transportation opportunities for students. So effectively, all the students that come to campus are coming by vehicle one way or the other. Very few students do otherwise, but about 25% of our students opt not to buy a parking permit, but we know they park on campus anyway. Unfortunately, by rule, we're limited to how much penalty we can charge those students who violate that policy, and so it's almost unenforceable, quite honestly. And so the students who are buying parking permits are frustrated that those who don't seem to get away with it, and it causes problems. So, and lastly, improved campus shuttle, general campus transportation opportunities, which this plan does address. We will enhance all of these things. We'll support, in addition, obviously, sidewalks, bike lanes, traffic safety in general. And as Dr. Stinson pointed out, for the majority of students, this will actually represent a cost reduction by $60 a year, academic year. So I appreciate your consideration of this plan. We're just asking for some room to be able to do this and work with our own board of trustees to find out the right fit for Tennessee Tech. We're not really asking anything that most, if not all, of the other institutions are already doing, have been doing for a long time in terms of supporting parking and campus transportation through mandatory fee structures. And so it's not an exception in that case. We're not setting a precedent in that case. But I appreciate your consideration, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
What sort of questions does the commissioner have?
Motion on the item.
Commissioner Smith?
Do you want to put it on the floor first with a second, or do you want to
Is there a
have
second?
discussion first?
Well, is there a second? Let's pursue.
I'll second,
Okay.
and then maybe some questions.
Okay, open up for conversation.
Well, I appreciate the presentation because I had a page full of questions and you've answered some of them. What is not clear is are we being asked to approve a 1-year or a 3-year request? Because you presented this in terms of $100 for this year, but your debt service or your proposal requires 3 years of implementation.
So we're only asking for an exception for this year. Any future cost increases would have to come through by reducing our tuition increases in those particular years, but it gives us some time to make sure that we are there for doing that for the other 2 years.
Then why can't you do that? It's certainly mathematically possible for you to do that for this first year.
Well, see, we have quite a bit of cost already built into our parking and transportation structure. And that's why we came forward with this plan, is because we're proposing to eliminate that non-mandatory fee that we currently charge and actually go to a fee that is lower than the non-mandatory fee that students currently pay for parking.
And this involves all students, correct?
It does.
Online?
They have a separate fee structure, so no, it would not be. The ones who are totally online have a separate.
Dual enrollment?
Excuse me?
Dual enrollment?
They don't come to the campus, so they don't pay those fees either.
Here's what I'm uncomfortable with, and I wish I could call up the grace and diplomacy of former Commissioner A.C. Wharton at a moment like this. What bothers me is that you're asking us to make a change, an exception here that is really a policy change within your own institution. You could easily do this and take care of this within the available resources if that be your will.
We have looked at, our current finances. We've done a lot of, and we do every year look at, are there places where we can make cuts and that type of thing. But at the same time, we have to consider that we want our students to have a good experience on campus. The students are pushing us for these good experiences. And at the same time, we have to think about the university moving forward and offering the things that programs and that type of thing. We have to have a cost structure that addresses the needs and also provides a campus that the students, that it meets our students' expectations.
So it's an issue of priorities.
It is a priority with our students. Yes, it is.
Okay.
I have it's been about 3 or 4 years ago that I started meeting regularly with a group of students that our Student Government Association had identified, because the students at that time felt like they didn't have a place that they could come and talk about what they wanted from the business aspects and the facilities aspects of the university. And so I did that. They like to meet at 7 o'clock at night, but that's okay. I will do that and do that. And so what I promised them is that I would do whatever they requested. We would take a look at it. I would do everything I could to help them achieve the things that they wanted. And if I couldn't, I would tell them why I could not. And that's what I'm doing today.
I just had a couple of questions. So would this fee also affect students that are living on campus that don't necessarily bring their car?
It does now.
Okay. Okay. I guess another concern that I had that would be something to think about, just thinking about my experience as a commuter student, or let me backtrack and ask another question. Can I have a little bit more detail about your rule on enforcement, like why you guys are unable to charge more for enforcement? I know that was mentioned, but I just wanted to know more.
With parking, you're required to do a rulemaking, and we have done that. And a part of our negotiations on the rulemaking included that we would keep our parking fines comparable to the cities and our local area. And that's what we do, but our local area does not have real parking fines. We also have discussed doing towing vehicles, but that's pretty extreme for students. And we do, if we have repeat offenders, we do boot cars. But I'm just going to say some of the students really don't care that they're getting fines. They really don't. I had I don't know, been about 2 or 3 years ago that I had a parent call just upset, and this was spring semester, and she's telling me she does not understand why we have done a $1,000 increase in our tuition. So we had made a tuition increase, and that's what I told her. And I said, well, let me check on your child's account. I couldn't tell her because they hadn't given her permission to know exactly what, but I suggested she talk to her student because it was actually $1,000 worth of parking fines.
That's interesting.
So, It's
Yeah.
a real balancing act to handle this. It really
Yeah.
is. I understand exactly what you're.
Yeah, I will say the one time I got towed, I'm never gonna park at that parking lot again, for what it's worth. But I guess my concern with this of going to like a flat fee is that students who don't buy a parking pass, who don't illegally park, are gonna also now be parking since they're already paying, which will put more of a burden on parking and lack of parking. So I guess that's not really a question that I have for you, but more of a concern with this, because I feel like if there's already a strain on parking, now that everyone has the ability to do it, there are students who aren't buying it, who haven't been parking illegally, but now they're going to. So I just would, I don't know, suggest a different way of thinking as opposed to, I don't know, raising the fee or something. I'm not really sure how you would tackle that because it's a tough issue, but I do worry about that being an issue now.
And that is the reason that the proposal is specifically for building a parking
Yeah.
garage, 800 space parking garage. That's how, that would be what we're going to do with, you know, in addition to providing the shuttles on campus. And that's, you know, goes back to your question about housing students. They get to use the shuttles, the sidewalk improvements and that type of thing. But specifically right now, what we need to do is to build a parking garage, which provides the additional parking spaces that students are requesting.
If I could just interject there as well, a lot of it's not the number of spaces. We actually have a fairly adequate supply of space. This is the location of parking spaces that are at issue. And the only way to supply a significant number of additional parking spaces in the central part of campus, quite honestly, because of the real estate pressure, is through a parking garage. And that's why we're addressing it in this way. So it's really more the location than it is the number.
Okay, that brought up, sorry, a new question. Are you guys able to do, I mean, this is just a suggestion because this is how we do it at Knoxville, since it's a pretty large campus. We do like a tiered system. So there's commuter core, commuter intermediate, like passes for location of garage, and with those comes an increase of price. Is that something that you've potentially thought about as a way to alleviate this for students? I know that the issue with the like fees for not parking in the right area are pretty low, but is there a way to negotiate that agreement that you previously mentioned to maybe make penalties higher and the interior of campus lower on the exterior, but also have a tiered system for how much students are paying for those certain areas?
So we have had a zoned parking plan on Tennessee Tech's campus for a number of years. This would be the equivalent of the transportation cost at UT Knoxville. In your student fees, mandatory fees that you pay at Knoxville, they have a $129 transportation fee. So this per semester. So this is the equivalent of that. And we would not be doing the parking, the additional charges that you're talking about for the zone parking.
Thank you very much. And I certainly appreciate the presentation and questions. I made the motion on this item because I strongly support it as a common sense business decision. Let's look at the information right there on the slide. You currently have 75% of students paying $260 a year to follow the rules and park. You have 25% of the students gaming the system, improperly pulling their cars onto campus, crossing their fingers, hoping they don't get a ticket. This is actually a fee reduction on the people who have been following the rules, going from $260 to $115. This is also a user fee. If you use it, you pay for it. Right now, we have 25% of the students using it and not paying for it. They are gaming the system. Parking is a business decision related to the attractiveness of the university, to admissions, to people being able to reasonably on time attend their classes. And again, it is a user fee. The $115 proposed fee is equivalent to $11.50 a month. Any of you that came and parked out here can't park for $11.50 an hour. This is a simple business decision that is going to lead to a fee reduction for the majority of students at Tennessee Tech. $11.50 a month. Is it worth this kind of and you know, that provides revenue debt that'll eventually come before the Tennessee State School Bond Authority to construct a garage. This is the kind of thing I think that is dangerous for us to micromanage because it defeats the business plan of a university. These universities are businesses in a large sense, and the attractiveness and the ability they have to recruit and retain students is key. And again, 75% of the kids are following the rules. They're buying a $260 permit while the person parking next to them is gaming the system, hoping they don't get a ticket, and taking advantage of them. This is fair to the overwhelming majority of students at Tennessee Tech. This is a user fee for the people who use it, and I appreciate it and support the proposal.
Commissioner Smith?
I don't think we're questioning the business decision. What I'm questioning is that we're using the request for the exemption of tuition and mandatory fees and offloading that decision off on THEC rather than for them to make that. And if it's that good of a decision, then it's their priority. It's their decision.
Thank you. And I agree with your premise 100%. As a matter of fact, I wrote a letter a couple years ago suggesting we do away with this process because of things like that. So I agree with the premise, but that's the rules. That's the game we have to play by. And that is why I support, under the rules of this organization, the request. I mean, they have to make this request in order to accomplish this goal. And that's why I support it at this level. Thank you.
I have just two questions. What percentage, well, I guess three, what percentage of the students don't drive to campus? Like, it's like 5%? Like, I couldn't imagine it's very large.
Probably 1%.
Okay. Will those students have an opportunity to get a waiver to get out of to not pay the parking fee?
About 25% of those students, 25% of our total students. So there is a lot of students, say 24% of our students who are driving to campus and parking, taking a chance. They don't do that every day. You know,
Sorry, let me ask the question a little bit differently. I apologize. Of all of your students, if 1% of your students do not have a car and don't drive to campus and will not be parking, will they have an opportunity to get a waiver so they wouldn't pay the parking fee?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I could address that, you know, the thing with mandatory fees, campus access fees, is you're providing basic infrastructure that everybody can utilize if they choose to. You know, that funds things like counseling centers and student health centers and recreation centers, a lot of things that many students utilize, but not necessarily all students do. You know, these are basic campus infrastructure services. I don't think we want to get into a situation where everybody can opt in or opt out of basic infrastructure that, you know, based on what their choices are at the moment. So it's not unusual to do it this way. Like I said, I think maybe all of the other LGI campuses already do it this way in terms of a mandatory fee. I think it makes a lot of sense to do it in our case because there are very few students that would legitimately have a case to say, hey, I don't bring a car to campus ever. again, we don't have any public transportation locally to speak of. And so there are very few, if any, that would never drive on campus.
Okay, that's what I was asking. When you think about this fee with all the other infrastructure fees, like when a student receives their bill, is it line itemed, campus infrastructure, just a lack of knowledge on my part. Is it line item campus infrastructure fees and it includes all of these things together? Or is this spelled out separately as like, here's your rec center fee, or here's your whatever parking fee? And how does a student receive this bill?
So the student bill is going to show several different things, including a program fee. This one would show separately on their bill. But the other thing that we do is we, on our website, provide our students with a breakdown of exactly what they are paying for. And the reason that we went to that process is because the bills got so large, just because you're trying to give them way more information than they need with, than you can provide on a bill.
Okay.
What is their reduction for the different types of financial aid? All that stuff goes on the bill. And so that's why we went to that process. And that's the process that all the other universities
I'm
are
just
using.
curious. It's been a while since I've gotten a bill from school. One other question, why would these sorts of fees not be wrapped into tuition? Like, why would it not be like one bucket of fees? Do we have to split it up? Are there rules around that, or?
With the fees, we do. I think we are required to separate those fees, but I couldn't quote you exactly.
I was just curious. What is the expected increase in these $100 per semester mandatory parking fees over the next 3 to 4 years? Given that I know that it'll be a bond request for the parking lot.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
So the fees right now you're requesting is $100 per semester mandatory increase, or 115, sorry. What will be those increases over the next few years for students, like in the next 3 or 4 years? Because I think that you've got to use those funds to request a bond for the parking lot, right?
So the plan we put together was the initial $200, and then we would increase the dollars for this particular fee by $100 for 2 more years. And but we would do that with no exceptions, and either let's make an assumption that you all approved a 0 tuition increase. So we would have no flexibility there, but we would need to move forward with it. Then we would have to look at our other fees and reduce those fees to accommodate what we need.
So let's say this passes today, though, it's $100. Let's make it easy. $100 this year, and then next year it'll be $200, and the next year it'll be $300. The next year it'll be $400.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, living in Nashville, there's an organization here called Metropolis, which is a parking company, and they take pictures of our license plates. Have you looked into license plate readers for this property?
We actually implemented license plate readers last year, and that did help with our enforcement. But even the license plate readers, we're having to hire additional personnel in order to cover the whole campus. And
okay, I was just curious. Any other questions?
Madam Chair, this is Trey. I do have one.
Yes.
And I think it dovetails in the question you asked a moment ago, but I'm just going to try and give a really simple example where I come at this from. I want you to imagine a family, couple of parents who are getting ready to Pickett County, get ready to send their child to college the first time, Hope Scholarship. They're all excited, and they have cobbled together the money to make sure that, borrowed it, done whatever they had to do to make sure that their child finally gets to go to college and go to Tennessee Tech. They can't afford a car. They couldn't afford the window tint for a car. Are they going to pay that fee even though they don't own a car?
If they're on campus, they would.
All right,
Yes.
that settles it for me.
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Secretary, first of all, I've yet to meet that student, but if I would point out also that Tennessee Tech, about half our students graduate 100% debt free, and we have the lowest student debt of any public university in the state of Tennessee. So we are addressing those issues related to affordability. We provide, in addition to lottery scholarships that are available to students, I mean, we provide a significant amount of scholarship assistance to students that come to Tennessee Tech as well. And we're very sensitive to that, and we look at it very closely. If I thought for 1 minute that this would create an additional burden, unrealistic burden to any student, I would not be bringing it to this commission, I can assure you. And so, again, I understand the concern, and I share the concern, but I do not believe that any student will be negatively impacted by this particular proposal.
Well, Dr. Oldham, and I have tremendous respect for you and the many things you have achieved at Tennessee Tech and the achievements to come. I know they're called mandatory fees for a reason, but you know, if we've yet to meet that student who doesn't own a car, doesn't drive a car to campus, doesn't park, then I don't understand what the problem be with creating some type of waiver process for some students to say, I do not own a car, I'm not going to drive a car onto campus, I'm not going to utilize parking, and see how many people take you up on that. And then frankly, if somebody signs something saying they're never going to park on campus, and then they do, you throw the book at them. And what we need to do, we can legislatively to give you the opportunity for you to do that. But, you know, I don't understand why, given the opportunity a moment ago, somebody talked about creating a waiver, y'all didn't back off of that. To me, that's a simple opportunity for y'all to be able to create that exemption for the student you say doesn't exist.
Well, I honestly don't think they do, but in the case that you outlined, I would gladly provide a waiver. And if that makes a difference to the commission in terms of us agreeing to provide waivers for students who legitimately can be verified that they're never going to drive a car on campus, I'd gladly do that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to discuss this item. To be honest, you know, I was a little concerned yesterday when this item did not come before the Finance and Operations Committee. This is something that, to my view, should have come before the committee because there are a lot of questions, like, for instance, the questions that you, Madam Chair, got into. I'm not even sure what we're approving here today in terms of the finance structure and how this fee is going to work in future years and what its relationship is to future maximum fee and tuition levels that may be set by this commission. Those are all questions that, in my view, need to be explored and understood, at least by us, before we vote on this. It's not a criticism of what TTU is doing here and Dr. Oldham and his staff have proposed, because yes, there's a very compelling business case on its surface made by that slide that's on the screen right now, you know, just looking at it. But, you know, and to the point that the comptroller made, and the comptroller has quite rightly pointed out before on the matter of mandatory fee and tuition things, that he believes that that ought to be set by the board of the institution, by the board of trustees, you know. And of course, we're responding to a state statute passed by the legislature that says we have a role in that and everything. And accordingly, that brings me to my second point here, which is that we, you know, if we're going to be making exceptions to the mandatory fee and tuition levels, then we need to be understanding as a commission or as a committee or whatever the relevant body is, what our standards are for that. You know, is it that, you know, for, as Dr. Oldham quite rightly pointed out, other universities use this type of fee to deal with parking on campus, and most all the other LGIs, except maybe Tennessee State, I guess, have a parking garage on campus already and everything that they finance through fees similar to this probably. So all those things need to be considered and understood and articulated by the staff and by us as a commission, so that there is some respect for our procedures in setting mandatory fees and tuitions, and our procedures in granting exceptions there too. And I'll close with the last thing that concerns me about this, and I spoke to Dr. Oldham on the phone about it yesterday, is that, every time in my almost 18 years as state treasurer and the 34 boards and commissions that I sit on in the state, whenever the board or commission approves something as an exception or whatever, then invariably in the future, you hear that again, because somebody comes in and says, well, you remember that exception you voted for so-and-so a few years ago? Well, I want that same exception. I need an exception now, and you gave it to them, and why don't you give it to us? And then they go talk to their legislators who come to you and tell you, well, there's a reason why you need to be granting this, because you granted it for somebody before, and we want equal treatment in this community of Tennessee. So I'm just concerned about all of those things. We could probably overcome all of those things after looking at this a little bit further and getting further facts and information about it. And again, understanding and articulating what our policy is going to be in terms of implementation in the future. But that's not where it is right now, in my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All good comments. Let's just recap. This is a fee reduction for 75% of the students who have been following the rules. It's a user fee for the 25% that have been gaming the system. It's a user fee of $11.50 a month. And we have speculated about a lot today. Something may happen with the lottery money. It may not this year, but we've worried a lot about it. This is a real world problem that exists today, though. Other universities have been allowed to utilize this model and are successfully utilizing it today. So to deny this request is to say, we know you have a problem. Students, we know you've asked for this solution, but no, have a good day. $11.50 a month to be able to park, to me, is not too much to ask. And you've seen Dr. Oldham say, and Secretary, I think you had a great comment about creating an exemption. If somebody doesn't have a car, they're not a user, they shouldn't have to pay that. And Dr. Oldham said he will create an exemption method for those very few people. And so I just renew my motion and appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Can I just ask one clarifying question? So this will replace what is effectively $130 per semester fee with $100. But did I hear you correctly that the following year this would then increase another $100?
That is correct, but we would not come back for an exception on any other increases that we do.
So it would move to $200 per semester after this year.
I have one question, just go ahead. I'm sure there's a reason, but I think I heard that the Tennessee THEC's board has not yet approved this. I was just curious why it's before us, before it went to them, and
I would defer to President Oldham on that, except for this, and that is most institutions follow what the cap is that the commission sets before they set their own tuition rate. So I assume that's related to this, but I'll defer to President Oldham or Dr. Christensen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Our board of trustees cannot act on any proposal such as this until this commission decides on what the overall cap is going to be. That gives us the fences that we have to operate in. So although we've had conversations with board members around this plan, they have yet to see it in its entirety because we couldn't guarantee that we could propose it as is until this commission rules on it.
Thanks.
I will say that also brings up the point about timing. You know, and I realize that the commission has limitations on what it can do here as well, but you know, so we're in mid-May until we know what kind of binding ranges there are on tuition and fees. Our board will meet this next month, and then the fiscal year starts July 1. So that, you know, this is a very compressed time of year in order to work out all of these questions and concerns that legitimately people might have. But in order to act on anything, there's just not much time to get through all that. And although we would love to have all those conversations well in advance, without knowing much about where the commission is going to land, it's hard to have those conversations.
I have one more clarifying question about the cost. As Comptroller was talking and I was rereading the slide, I think I realized I messed things up. So right now it's $260 non-mandatory parking fee. If this goes through, it would be $200 mandatory fee per year. $300 the next year or $400 the next year?
300.
300 and then 400 and then 500. So it's not going to double per semester.
In order to provide all of the garage and all of the other services, that's what we have calculated would be, the fee would cap out at 400.
At 400.
It's a 3-year plan. But in order to get started, we need this particular exception. That's where we are.
Okay, I think that we should move forward with the vote on this. I would make two requests. One is that Dr. Oldham, if you would include a waiver opportunity for your students in whatever is finalized, assuming this moves forward. And then 2, for THEC, to work with us on determining what should our policies and approaches be for these mandatory fees, since we're responsible for it, so that we can set some sort of precedent moving forward. I think this is truly going to be an exceptional vote, but so that would be my 2 requests. So with that, any other comments or questions? Madam Secretary?
Chairwoman Scarlett?
Aye.
Commissioner Dieter?
Aye.
Commissioner Perry?
Aye.
Commissioner Rader?
No.
Commissioner Smith?
No.
Commissioner Wood?
Aye.
Secretary Hargett?
No.
Treasurer Lillard?
No.
Comptroller Mumpower?
Yes.
Chairwoman, you have 5 ayes and 4 nays.
Okay. Very slim passing of that. Something to consider moving forward.
If I could, Madam Chair, I just want to thank the commission for your consideration, and I understand it's a difficult decision to make. I do understand that, and I appreciate all the perspectives and all the comments for or against, and I can assure you we will continue to do everything in our power to support students here at Tennessee Tech to the best of our ability. So thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much. The next item on our agenda is the focused baccalaureate degrees. Dr. Julie Roberts, Chief Academic Officer, will provide us an overview of the agenda item and then answer any questions. Dr. Roberts.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go over just really high level to give you an idea of what we've been talking about, what the national landscape looks like for reduced credit bachelor's degrees, which we're proposing a different name for. Many thanks to Secretary Hargett and his team for their input throughout this process. But it just, again, high level, When we talk about reduced credit bachelor's degrees, these are degrees with a floor of 90 credits, but definitely less than 120. We're seeing as these are getting rolled out across the country, a lot of them land between 90 and 100 credits. A lot of the reductions that we've seen from other we haven't had one of these in Tennessee yet, just for some context there, but we have seen these happening across the country. And so the reductions that have been happening typically occur in elective courses. There are some instances where there's also some gen ed reduction, but we've seen more so the reduction in electives. The first reduced credit bachelor's degrees were actually approved in 2023 at Ensign College and Brigham Young University, their Idaho campus. Both of these institutions are accredited by the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities. Early programs, you can see, included things like software development, applied health, professional studies, communication, and information technology. Since then, we've seen institutional accreditors starting to weigh in with policy shifts. Those started really in earnest in 2024. THEC, which is the institutional accreditor for all of our public institutions, has actually issued guidance just in March. And so this is a really timely discussion as they're going through and refining their processes. I did want to mention the first THEC programs were approved at the University of Lynchburg. And you can see as in applied public health and applied educational studies. These were actually approved before the guidelines were issued. So just a little interesting thing there. Since then, apparently there are 2 more that have been approved but haven't been actually released to the public as far as what they are. We got a little inside knowledge from Dr. Stephen Pruitt. We hosted through the Tennessee Accreditation Network an overview with him, and he gave us some insider scoop there. But he didn't tell us what. So back to THEC guidelines. Currently, they have given some specific naming conventions. These types of programs need to be called abridged bachelor of whatever the discipline is, or reduced hour bachelor of, again, the discipline. They need to be offered in specialized or applied disciplines that, I'm kind of just reading this too, I know you can read, that address workforce needs and get students right into employment. They need to be aligned with the goals and missions of the institution. There is a focus in the guidance about they still need to align with other pieces of accreditation, including gen ed requirements, faculty responsibility and curriculum development. And they currently have an item there about marketing materials need to signal that these are a little different than a traditional bachelor's degree. You're going to see with our policy that our proposed name is Focused Baccalaureate Degrees. We've had a conversation with THEC about the potential of broadening that definition. They're planning to take that to their board in the summer. So just wanted to put some context there. The way that we've gotten to our draft policy, we have a task force that's comprised of representatives from LGIs, Board of Regents, TCUA, Tennessee Secretary of State's office, TUFS, which is the Tennessee University Faculty Senates, as well as UT System Office. I've got a lot of my colleagues that have been working on this in the audience today, so thank you for your willingness to work so closely with us. This has been quick. We first brought together the group in November. We set out the first draft in March, and then you have the draft that's in front of you today. We're hoping to bring a final draft at our next meeting. I've already gotten some feedback around what's drafted and in front of you that we'll be incorporating as appropriate, and hoping to get some feedback from the group today. So quickly, our proposed academic policy A1.6 would do a couple things. It creates a common naming convention, again, that focused baccalaureate degree. It also provides a framework for approval in order for an institution to decide that they want to go forward with this type of credential. One thing, this does lay on top of our other approval processes. So this is just for the first step of a campus to let us know that they're planning to pursue this and that they've thought about the things that we've asked them to think about, which I'll talk about in a second. There's 2 paths to approval, one through the new academic program approval process, which you are quite familiar with. And then we also have another process which we handle internally called program modification. That's when campuses want to shift something to an existing program, changing modality, This would be changing credit hours, adding degree designations, those kinds of things. The other thing, since these are so new, you'll see in the policy, we're going to require annual monitoring for the first 5 years after approval. We haven't decided exactly what that'll look like. Once we figure out what the approval process is, we'll then work on the specifics of what that monitoring will look like. We really want to make sure students are receiving a strong credential, that they're ready for the workforce, that they have opportunity for graduate education if they pursue it. So those are likely some of the things that we'll put into that annual monitoring requirement. So these are our proposed approval requirements in the policy. First and foremost is demonstrated alignment with in-demand workforce needs. This isn't that different from what we ask for in all of our programs, but we really, again, want to make sure that these credentials are fulfilling a workforce need. We also want clear industry involvement in the development. Here we're thinking things like having advisory groups, providing some type of input from employers to make sure that these credentials are actually going to be acknowledged in the workforce. Along those same lines, we're requiring work-based learning. So these are things like co-ops, internships, apprenticeship models, really trying to give students hands-on best practices types of curriculum development. Also, since we're anticipating a lot of these will be industry focused, we're encouraging stacked credentials. And I love when we stack credentials. And so I really think it's a good opportunity for institutions to be thinking about intentionality of how these programs are being developed. And then we want campuses to be thinking about how could these students then move on to graduate programs. We want to ensure that this new type of credential is not a dead end. We want to make sure that as students are pursuing something different, that there's workforce value and that students are able to successfully utilize them in whatever the next step is. So I know that was quick, but I really did want to hear from you if you have any input or thoughts. So.
Open it up for questions and comments. Dr. Roberts? Mr. James?
If I may.
Yes, Secretary Hargett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Roberts, thank you for a very informative presentation and for all the work that you have done with our department, Chris Mustaine and Jonathan Rummel, work with us. And I want to echo a very positive conversation with Dr. Pruitt recently. Now, as an aside, I asked him, could I come to the next SACS meeting, SACS CLC meeting, to address this issue and encourage him to take up the language, calling it a focused bachelor's degree. I was told that I would not be allowed to come and speak, but I am optimistic that they will hear our plea. I think it's a very accurate title for that type of degree. I think the other types of language that are being used kind of diminish what the degree is really about. I don't anticipate a lot of 18-year-olds deciding this is the path they're going to take. But I do think there are people who are going to be out in the workforce who are thinking, I do want to go back and do something, and I really don't want to take a PE class. And I think that's a lot of what this is about, frankly, is helping people focus their efforts to get them where they want to be in their career, and hopefully at the end of the day, helping them get to market faster while potentially taking on less student debt and certainly less expense.
Mr. James?
Madam Chairman, I've got a few questions, and I certainly want to have some robust conversation about this. First of all, I think this seems to me that we ought to be thinking of a three-year degree as different rather than lesser or in between. And I appreciate what the Secretary brought forward. And I think focused is what it needs to be. And while we're advocating for a name, there seems to me that there ought to be some other things that we would advocate for. If, you know, it's not every day, as in it hasn't been, I don't think, in too many of our lifetimes, that the concept of a new level of degree has come around. We've seen conversation in the General Assembly about, are we going to take K-12 teachers and say an associate's degree is sufficient? And while it's very difficult from a practical standpoint to say in 2 years you can work everything in that's necessary to teach appropriately, yet we do see some of the best nations around the world concentrating a bachelor's degree into 3 years. But the way they do so is to concentrate on what they're focusing on. Not, in other words, 2 years of prereqs and half a major. And I say that as a part-time political science professor who recognizes that not too many people that come into my class are poli-sci majors, right? But if we're in the business of, for instance, training a teacher with a 3-year degree, it seems to me this could be an excellent solution for an elementary school teacher if those 3 years concentrate on what it takes to educate a child who's learning to read, who is coming along in that. And I have concern that we're at this beautiful inflection point where probably many people never thought we would be necessarily. And if we take it and say, okay, do your prereqs and half a major, and we're going to call that a degree, that's not what we need. It's not what the state of Tennessee needs. We at the same time will have conversations back and forth about how the future of higher education has to be about the credentials that are most necessary for the workforce at a specific point in time. I was very pleased in there to see in their guidance that it has to be something that's required of the workforce. I'd written myself a note here to say, hey, this has to solve a problem that the state of Tennessee has. And our mindset needs to be in terms of the superstructure of what takes care of Tennessee's family and industry and all of those different things. That's a big part of it. So, I'm happy to volunteer. I understand you've got your policy task force and all of that. And if you need a flunky, somebody to get the water, I'm happy to come to this because this is an extremely unique place to be in. Because if we as a state, for instance, decide that XYZ job, which has always required a 4-year degree, now only requires a 2-year degree, we find ourselves in a bit of a no man's land in terms of reciprocity and other things with all these other states in the nation. And it's not to say that it isn't born out of a real necessity, but a 3-year degree that's properly concentrated on that can get us where we need to be. And I admit, my wife is a teacher, and she's got her bachelor's from Oxford. And in 3 years, she was able to do that and be an excellent special education teacher. So having seen the possibility of that sort of concentration work, I know it could happen. Also, and I raised this in our pre-call, and I wanted to ask also the task force, and maybe it's a SAC-SOC question, I don't know. Have there been conversations with the War Department and the ROTC programs in terms of will a focused baccalaureate be sufficient for the commissioning of an officer in the armed forces? And I know there wasn't necessarily when we talked about it, but you probably have some info on that.
I do.
Cool. Let's go.
Well, that was a lot, Nathan, and I have a lot of answers. But I also know lunch is next. To your last question, many thanks to my colleagues. I think in the room I've got Ken and Katie Staple. So I got a very typical government answer. It depends around the officer commissioning. And so there's 2 different tracks, and I can definitely get in the weeds with you. So it's something that I've flagged, and I know Ken has flagged it with some of his VA counterparts across the country. And so, but it was, what I want to say, it was a really good point of something that there's going to be some unintended consequences or just things we hadn't thought about. I want to call it a consequence. And so as we're thinking about monitoring and some other things, as we step along the path, being thoughtful about how we can help as we find these things and help mitigate if it would create some challenges. So, but yeah, we can definitely talk some more. You can grab Ken and Katie. But a couple of things that you mentioned before that, Nathan. I agree wholeheartedly. We don't want this as a bachelor's light. The way that we are really hoping, and we're hoping that the policy will incentivize institutions to think about this, as well as employers, is, yeah, it's less credit hours, but it still has the same value. Thinking about your wife and her teaching degree and the fact that it's not a lesser than. We did actually pull together our university EPP, our college, I forget, our college vet folks. We have so many acronyms, I can't remember them. But we pulled that group together actually right before or right after the new year and talked about, is this something that maybe could help fill that gap with teacher shortages? And we've seen some states are going that route. So I have no answers here, but you've hit on a lot of the things that we're thinking through. So you're definitely signed up for the task force. So welcome.
Okay, great. And I'm very curious as to why does it do more good for the education structure, for the workforce, and for the world beyond higher education to require all of the same prerequisites
Yeah.
in a 3-year period of time and less of the major, when we could have something? I would think that could be a dive in. So when you come out, you are actually skilled in the business that this degree says you're skilled in.
Agreed. And that's what we're hopeful for.
Thank you for putting up with me, Madam Chair.
Dr. Smith? Did you have a question? No? Any other questions or comments? Okay.
All right. Well,
very
thank you so much.
Does anyone else have any other business you'd like to cover? Anything? Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Our next meeting is Thursday, July 23rd.